On November 5th, 2024, a comet flew past the satellite, heading toward Earth. After falling in the capital of country R, a meteorite destroyed the entire island nation, wiping out everything. Among the ruins stood a stone with glowing symbols. Scientists were to be flown to the island, closed to humans, to study the stones. A year later, in Haicheng, China, a guy showed a photo of a beautiful girl who was from that country R. She was looking for someone to adopt her, and he asked a friend if he would adopt her to foster a patriotic spirit. But Lin Luo just looked at his friend, tears streaming down his face. His friend called out to him while the boy just stared at the girl. He remembered the monsters that were now their reality. One of them, it seemed, had opened its mouth and snarled, frightening everyone around it. He remembered that the laws of humanity had disappeared, and there were only the weak and the strong. He thought about only fighting tiger-level monsters to practice his fighting skills. Before the boy's eyes, he himself stood with his sword raised. But the enemies summoned a terrible creature, to which Lin Luo's brother sacrificed himself to protect him. He saw his brother disappearing into the beast's jaws. He lay there, wounded in the chest and bleeding, while now he thought that they wanted to escape from the other world with the Ascension Crystal, which should not be given to demons under any circumstances. As he was leaving, he asked one of the guys what day it was, and when he replied that it was November 12th, 2025, he added that young guys like him shouldn't drink so much that even their memory fails them. He thought he was reborn exactly 3 years ago, so he still has a few hours before his abilities awaken, because it's almost morning now. His boss, standing nearby, began shouting that his actions were against the company's interests and, pointing a finger at him, notified Lin Luo of his dismissal. Looking back at the manager, the boy thought that Wang Ji Chao just needed an excuse, even the smallest one, to fire him. He remembered that in a past life, the manager was a demon who collected people's organs, limbs, and lives, then traded them for increased power. Law didn't think they would meet again. The others nodded as Chao said that a bastard raised by wolves shouldn't be so highly regarded by Wen Yu. The manager looked very angry. Leaving without a word, Lin Luo recalled that he had beaten Chao half to death then, and that same day the National Awakening began, which he had missed because he was in a detention camp. He walked down the street without even turning around, thinking that after Shen Zhou was released from prison, his own life had become much better. The boy remembered his brother, who had been released early because powers very important to the country had awakened in him. Then, restraining the demon, he asked if Law was okay. And then Lin Luo accidentally killed a man, and holding the bloody brick in fear, realized that his powers had also awakened. He was then protecting the girl who thanked him. Li looked at the monument that appeared in front of him. He could take the soul power of another person through killing without using his own power. Then he obtained the E level. Realizing that in a past life he and his brother died together, in this one, Law looked at the artifacts in his hand and thought that for the sake of justice, he would turn to others through the heavens. Smiling maliciously, the boy thought that now he would be angrier than everyone, and his enemies would become his incentive, and only he would claim the throne of the winner. Having received his tasks, he was now smiling because he knew the secrets of the dungeons near Hangzhou about world travel and secret passages. This would help him become SSS level as soon as possible. But while he was thinking about taking over the world, someone said he was cute, causing Law to widen his eyes in surprise. Peeking into the office, the guy realized it wasn't his, hearing about how Wang Ji Chao wanted to push Level D into his circle because they were friends. While the manager was walking and talking on the phone about some girl, Lin Luo spied on him, thinking that he would get revenge when he got bored. Placing a noose around his neck, Luo said he was very happy to see the ruler of Zhou again, while he coughed and spat out saliva trying to breathe. Lin said he would be the perfect sacrifice for his reincarnation. He changed because he had a special ability. He could summon his double under certain circumstances. And while the hated manager was glaring at him, Law said with a smile that unfortunately it was too late to treat him. As Zhou died, Lin Luo's power grew greater. He advanced level after level while his former boss foamed at the mouth. Seeing the message that his level had reached S, the boy exhaled and said to himself that he could now open his inventory. As he tested his new power, Law thought that in his past life, He and his brother had spent 3 years reaching A level, and this time he had reached S level in a few hours. He summoned his double. Before him stood a huge warrior in armor, with stones on his helmet and in several places on his armor. His eyes burned with a purple glow through his head. His double was the Dark Emperor himself, who was S level and far more durable and skilled than any human. Lo mentioned another person who created a double thinking about the inventory limit at S level, which was only 200 points. Another SS level guy who created a doppelganger already had a different appearance and an inventory limit of 400 points. And the third was at SSS level, which gave him the biggest advantage. The inventory limit was as much as 600 points. Returning to the Dark Emperor, the boy reflected on how little intelligence he had and how he could control the battle only with the power of thought. But clenching his hands into fists as this S-level warrior stood behind him, Lin Luo thought that the Dark Emperor was the strongest possible double at that level of strength. But the boy wasn't worried, because his abilities compensated for the fact that the Emperor couldn't take by force other doppelgangers in battle. He also smiled contentedly at the Emperor's height, which was the same as most SSS level ones. Ordering the bodies to die, Luo watched with a smile as the Dark Emperor threw Wang Jichao's body away and carried the dead man away. The boy thought that Chao had turned into a demon in the flesh after the chaos broke out, and that dying in the bathroom would be a worthy death for him, while he stared at the Emperor's back. Standing with a smile under the door of the restroom where everything had happened, Law thought that they definitely wouldn't find him that quickly in the restroom, and he felt invincible at that moment. Walking down the street, Law looked at his phone, where his teammates were chatting and discussing their newly awakened powers. He could see that everyone was starting to awaken, which was quite unusual. He thought about the fact that Li Ming, who now had S abilities, had teamed up with Fan Meng in his past life, and after that, both of them killed many innocents by joining the group. He decided to kill him. Li Min's double studied the magic book she held in her hands, ignoring Li Min, who was sitting next to her. He thought with satisfaction that the guy in the chat had finally called him Dad, and that it was really cool that this doppelganger was actually fulfilling his master's wishes. Returning to the prayer master, who was his double, he pointed his finger at her and said that he wanted to have Fang Meng's mind and body in its entirety. Using her power, the prayer master released the book that had been levitating nearby. A few seconds later, she told the owner that his wish had come true. He was happily texting, ordering Meng to show up at the hotel because the double would be arriving soon and his girl couldn't miss such a show. He was pleased, shouting that he was incredible and that he had a lot of power. Turning to his double, he said that as long as he was here, he could rule the whole world. After calling Li Min, Luo said that he had found the main ability of the S-class double and said that they needed to meet urgently, asking where he was. Wanting to know more, Ming quickly gave the hotel address and asked how soon Lin Luo could arrive, and heard that as soon as he could. Clutching the phone in his hand, the boy smiled contentedly, because now he would not only receive Lin Luo's secret, but also the goddess Fang Meng, the goddess of his dreams. 5 minutes later, Lo stood at the threshold of the hotel room and smiled, hearing that Min had a meeting here soon, and he immediately asked what the secret was and what kind of ability Lo had. Leaning down to whisper everything in his ear so that no one could hear even close, Luo smiled. Li Ming couldn't wait to listen. At the same time, a double appeared behind him, the Dark Emperor, whose order was already ready and waiting for its time. The next moment, Ming, turning his head towards Lo's double, received a blow to the jaw from him and was thrown back. While the Dark Emperor stood nearby, monitoring the situation in the room, Ming sat by the wall and waited while Lo walked over to him and chose what he wanted to take with the plunder skill. The boy thought. Min was an ordinary person and had nothing until his abilities were awakened. His inventory was small, and soul power would not help, so he chose abilities. Lin Luo was pleased to think that the Book of Wishes was a very useful ability, as it helped with both attack and defense, and also brought good luck to the owner. He summoned his other double, the Lord of Prayer, now shining brightly in his robes and with a Book of Wishes in his hand. Law read what skills the Lord possessed and ordered him to obey him. Lin Lo looked at his double standing in front of him with a smile. The guy asked why they could communicate with each other. The doppelganger replied that he was a special doppelganger, not like most people have, and he said that he could grant any wish because he was the Lord of Wishes. But he warned that small desires require little energy, bigger ones require a lot, and if there are too many of them and too often, it can kill him. He also said that he is smarter than others, so he can give advice. Lin Lo looked at the double in surprise, asking him why he didn't ask him where the treasure was, instead of asking for it to be given to him. That would be a small request, and Lo could handle it himself. The double also told what exactly takes up more energy and that using the Book of Wishes in relation to another person depends on their willpower. Becoming serious about the topic, Law asked the ruler what would be the consequences for him of freeing his brother from police surveillance. Studying the book carefully, the Lord said that it was very difficult and he would not even be able to speak for a while, especially since the process might be delayed and Brother Lo would not be released right away. Smiling, Law said that he thought that in such a situation, the most logical and easiest thing to do would be to ask about the capabilities of the S-Class. But the next moment, the Dark Lord returned, making Law smile with satisfaction, as he quickly lost his body. On the Dark Lord's chest was a clock, the hands of which showed exactly 12 o'clock and did not move, which made the boy think about it. He asked the wish-giver whether the image of the double was connected to the owner, to which he received an affirmative answer. The wish-giver said that the doubles were connected to the power of the owner's soul and his abilities. Lin Lo was visibly thoughtful, as the Dark Lord had no time-related abilities, and this had only appeared when Lo was reborn. Deciding to figure it out later, I left the hotel room, determined to explore all the dungeons and secret areas. At the same time, Fan Meng was thinking, looking at her messages, why she hated Li Min, but still came here and wished he would be banned as soon as possible because he was disgusting. Approaching the reception, the guy asked the girl to extend room 414 for another week, and because his friend doesn't like being disturbed, there was no need to clean it. Yu Taijie was dissatisfied and asked why his time travel had been postponed to other dates, looking at his interlocutor. The time mistress said that on her journey home, an unknown being took some of her power, and because of this, time and space were distorted. The man was visibly unhappy about this, gritting his teeth and angrily thinking that after paying a lot of money, he still got into a fight. This was Yu Taijie, who was SSS class and had discovered the ability to travel through time when he was reborn the last time. And with his abilities, he killed one of the gods to travel to another dimension. But there was a person from the same clan who did not speak, but then defeated him, easily throwing off both him and his assistant double. He then forced the girl to use all her energy from 4,000 to 40, and because she obeyed his order, she fell into a time loop. Now he remembered with displeasure that he had wanted to return a few weeks before the general awakening, but had returned a few hours later. And the mistress of time no longer knew the king of time. The doppelganger said that she seemed to feel the power of the Time King, and that it was one of the residents of Hangzhou. He asked in surprise if she was sure and how her ability had been transferred to someone else. She said she thought it was the man from the trip, but asked if the owner really wanted to find him. While the girl was trying to convince Tai Tze not to come in because the guy was strong and the owner had problems with close combat, he asked if she was sure that the stranger was from the illogical clan. The girl began to press him, telling him to believe her, because she definitely felt that her abilities were now in someone else's hands. Yu Taijie suggested that the Time Lord return to the dungeon and find her former teammates. The guard near the dungeon told people to walk with extreme caution and recommended breaking into groups of 5 people. The guys were very happy because they liked the dungeon. One of them said that a new era had begun for them and that it resembled a map of the planet. But the boys were arguing about who would go first. Another one asked if they really wanted to make him cannon fodder by sending him first. But here some looked in surprise at the boy who seemed to have dared to enter the dungeon first. It was Lin Lo, who was walking closer and closer to the entrance. Everyone was watching him, asking each other why he had gone alone, since they only let people into the dungeons in teams. Meanwhile, Lo was walking further and further into the portal. Putting his hands into the portal, the boy remembered that in his past life he was always afraid to go there. Lin Luo was determined to go into the dungeon, thinking that this time everything would be different and he would not be afraid. Lin Luo waited for the system to notify him that his body was currently undergoing a copying process. He also said that his health would be restored once he got out, and if he died 3 times, he would not be reborn again. The guy wondered what ability to choose, remembering that in his past life he had chosen a warrior who was around level 20, but now he had an S-class, and that helped him choose a different role. After a wave of his hand, Law's Wishmaster appeared, and he asked if he could recommend which ability to choose to have the best chance. The double, after thinking for a moment, replied that he advised choosing the Magician ability. After all, after level 20, you can become a seer, and with the help of the Dark Lord you can defeat the enemy's weaknesses in close combat. After thinking about the advantages of being an S level, it also occurred to the boy that the Dark Emperor had his own useful goals. He asked the wish holder what level he would reach if he chose Magician, and had robbery in his inventory. But the wish holder said that he did not recommend this inventory because it weakened the abilities of the Magician. But the boy thought that although the Lord's advice was good, his main ability was based on robbery, and everything was tied to the Dark Emperor. He thought that choosing Assassin would be better. Thinking, he fixed his gaze on the Lord, asking what his profession would be after the 2nd level if he chose Assassin. With a chuckle, he said that Outlaw Killer would go well with Heist, but still recommended taking Mage because it was the easiest. Determined to do things his own way, the boy pressed the button on the system that selects Murderer and apologized to the wish-granting master. He walked into the dungeon while his stats panel updated. He could feel the changes taking place. Lin Luo's eyes widened in surprise, realizing that his body was undergoing all the changes that appeared on his stat panel. A short knife appeared in his hand, which was his starting weapon, and had +6 to attack, which wasn't that much. Swinging his blade, the boy thought with satisfaction that he had done the right thing, because the killer was well matched with the power of the Dark Emperor who served him. Having chosen one person to complete, the boy thought with pleasure about the power of the Dark Emperor, which was on par with a level 20 or 30 player, and if you complete alone, you get additional rewards. Lin Luo chose the most difficult level of the dungeon. Although the system recommended choosing a lower one due to his 1st level, he confidently chose the most difficult one. The goblin dungeon was teeming with those same goblins. They stood and watched, and it seemed there was no end to them. Lin Luo appeared before them, alone, looking at the numerous goblin army. His opponent was a level 5 goblin, clutching a spiked club and waiting for an opportunity to attack. Lin Luo raised his hand. His fingers pulsed with the power he was about to use. The Dark Emperor he summoned appeared nearby, along with the power of 100 battles, whose strike frequency was increased by 20%. Calling upon the Emperor, who had already raised his fist around which his power revolved, the boy pointed his finger at the goblins and ordered them all to be destroyed. After killing the red-eyed goblin, whom the Emperor had killed with one blow, he stood and looked at the others while Law studied the rewards he had received. The Dark Lord used many fists with which he struck the goblins one by one, looking only straight ahead. The goblins flew one after another from the blows. The Emperor dealt mortal damage to each one. He and the Dark Emperor stood in a dungeon, where they killed 15 goblins and received ability upgrades and experience points. Lin Luo was pleased, smiling when he saw the congratulations on reaching level 6 and the amount of experience he needed to earn for the next level. The guy understood that the plunder ability could only be used 7 times, and he didn't want to waste it on petty goblins, so he decided to look at his inventory. He thought that poison could be added to the assassin's weapon, and he also needed agility, so he needed to add speed to upgrade agility. He chose 16 points to dexterity, 4 to strength, and another 10 to dexterity strength, consulting the system when he came up with his strategy. He thought as he walked on with the Emperor behind him that agility didn't reduce agility costs by 40% like Shadow Hunt and Ghost Strike. He remembered a past life where people fought before the dungeon began and used most of their strength before it began, without building a strategy to conserve agility and abilities. Moving on, the Dark Emperor scattered the 6th-level goblins everywhere, using his power and sometimes wrapping himself in shadow. Lin Lo watched everything, realizing that the goblins were becoming stronger. One in a wolf skin of the 6th level, another of the 7th level, and another even of the 8th, throwing stones. He continued walking towards the cave, thinking that he could handle everything, because he had also raised his level all the way to 7th. The guy smiled contentedly, because his turn had finally come to the dungeon with the boss he had been waiting for. Goblins were holding 2 girls hostage who were crying out for help. The monsters held them tightly, preventing them from escaping, and one of them was trying to take off her shirt. The boy saw 3 goblins, but regretted it because their abilities were very different from those of the Dark Emperor. One of the goblins, swinging his club, charged at Law, ordering him to run away as fast as he could. Using his powers, the boy looked at the goblins with disgust. Although they were only NPC characters, they still annoyed him greatly. The Dark Emperor, having received the order to destroy the goblins, swung a huge fist that sparkled with the power of his abilities. The next moment after the blow, the goblin flew away from the force. The Emperor struck him with his spear. The goblins used their skills and powers to create a power attack that had the shape of a skull and approached Law. The goblins watched as their brethren disappeared in the huge cloud of dust that the boy and the Dark Emperor had raised. When most of them were lying around and not moving, Lin Lo pointed his finger at the only one left and said that he was left alone and that he should run away and quickly if he wanted to live. The Dark Emperor and the Red Goblin looked at each other, calculating their own attacks. The goblin fell to the ground, hitting it from a single blow from Law's double. Standing over the goblin, the boy said that he was so weak, but he had to die anyway because goblins are good when they're dead. Once the goblin died, the boy gained experience and skills, reaching level 9, and now sat contentedly waiting for his treasure chest to be created, and his success rate had increased 10-fold. He smiled as he looked at the message that preceded his golden chest, which listed what he had received for completing the entire dungeon without harming himself and with a minimum level. Opening his golden chest, Law thought that thanks to the wish-granting master, getting gold was so simple and easy. He was content to look over the inventory in the chest: coins, items, iron items, rare items, and skills that would be useful to a mage and a warrior. Yu Taiji asked the Time Lord if she was sure that time travel didn't change the course of time, looking down at her. She said that it allowed her to return to her body and nothing more. He thought about it, saying that the first assumption was that the Emperor took the power to go through the dungeons in this world, and the second was that the Emperor from the future took the power to move to the present and complete the mission. The girl didn't understand why, because her power didn't improve her abilities, and why would he need her skills? Taizé said that he couldn't understand it himself, still thinking about it. But he immediately became more serious, saying that they had to find the Emperor anyway, because he didn't like having something taken from him. Meanwhile, Lin Lo stared in amazement at the golden lottery ticket 10 spins, because in his past life he had worked hard for 3 years, but still only received 5 spins in the entire time. Closing his eyes, he called out to the Lord of Prayers, saying that now it was his turn to choose and make history. The Lord appeared with a staff and a prayer book in his hands, saying that he was pleased to serve his master. The boy asked for help to win the biggest and best lottery prize possible. The Lord congratulated him, reminding him that such chests can only be won in 2 dungeons, Hell and Babylon. He continued that in the Wheel of Fortune, you can win inventory items from F to SSS, and some of them are impossible to find even in dungeons because they are so rare. The wish giver said that it all depends on the fortune of the one who spins the wheel, because the chances of certain items falling out vary, and it is impossible to guess. Lin Luo didn't want to understand that he might not be holding an S rank or higher item, so he pointed his finger at the doppelganger and asked why he didn't use his power and bring him luck. Hearing about the 6-month sleep, he thought that he should just choose S level, because his doppelganger's sleep would affect his own strength and other people's as well. He asked what would happen if he wished for 2 S-level items, and upon hearing the answer that it was 110 energy units, said that there must be at least 1 item of the required level. The wish-granting master began to use his power, saying that the master's wish would come true while he looked into his book. At the same second, Lin Luo threw the lottery ticket, using the Wheel of Fortune, and causing the system to start the lottery. Law was visibly pleased with what he had won in the lottery, as he could level up his doppelgangers and increase their spawn distance without his physical presence. Holding the extreme crystal in his hands, the boy regretted that there was only one SS-level item, although it was not bad. He squeezed the crystals in his hand, reading the system's prompts, which recommended using the crystals now and getting something. However, returning to the Dark Emperor, he gave the crystals to him, telling the double that they rightfully belonged to him and that he had earned them in battle. He almost immediately crushed both crystals in his hands, releasing the skill-enhancing energy that had been enchanted within them. Taking the energy crystal, he asked the Wishmaster who it would be best to give the two crystals to, at which the Wishmaster stared unblinkingly. He looked like a madman, even drooling a little as he looked at the crystals and told the owner to give them to him, because then he wouldn't have to worry about his energy problems. The Lord of Wishes was confused for a couple of seconds when Lin Lo actually gave him both crystals, telling him to keep them for himself in that case. The doppelganger shattered the crystals in his hand, releasing their power and absorbing it into himself, improving his energy stats. He was surprised and a little confused, thinking that he wouldn't be able to take everything he was used to if he didn't have the cosmic crystal, and his inventory had only improved by 4%, which wasn't much. Lin Lo decided that in order to get it, he had to go forward. While the others were leaving the dungeon and saying that they shouldn't have gone there, the boy was walking towards the dungeon, thinking that he needed to improve his level and that he had more strength than the others even now. Law looked at the entrance to the dungeon with a smile, thinking that it was time to go to Babylon to increase his level and level up, because there were endless levels there. While the others were discussing the Tower of Babel, Law thought that every 10 levels gave him a Wheel of Fortune ticket, and he had to try really hard this time to get as many as possible. A pretty girl appeared next to him, winked at him, and asked Lin Lo if he wanted to team up with her. The girl's mouth dropped open in surprise when the guy simply walked past her and didn't pay his usual attention, thinking that the team would only get in his way. As soon as they entered the dungeon, the Dark Emperor immediately set to work, scattering everyone to the sides as Lin Lo ordered him. Having passed the first floor in 20 seconds, Law climbed to the second floor while the system announced that the name of the Dark Emperor was popular throughout the world. On the second floor, a guy with a smile told the dogs of this level to attack and asked if they were waiting for him. Everyone who saw the Dark Emperor's statistics wondered who he was, because he was able to progress through levels so quickly and win all by himself. Lin Lo, meanwhile, climbed up to the 10th floor, opening the door carefully so as not to be caught off guard. The boy remembered that the first person in his past life to pass the 10th floor was Juju, and since he himself had already passed such a path, he was obliged to pass at least to the 12th level. Before him appeared with a roar and a sword the dog-headed Lord Ilfin, his eyes glowing green. The dog swung and struck with all his might with his sword, forcing the boy to back away. Vig understood that the combination of his opponent's abilities was not the best solution for himself. The Dark Emperor nearby charged into battle, gathering purple light and dark shadows around him. He raised his fist for a close-quarters attack. The next moment, the dog flew away from the Dark Emperor, growling and spreading its arms to its sides. Lord Ilfin swung, attacking Law's double using some of his red light power. But within seconds, the boss upstairs was lying face down at the feet of Lin Lo, who was simply watching what was happening. The guy seriously looked at the system message, which said that he had become the first player in the world to climb the 10th floor of the Tower of Babel alone and receive 10 lottery tickets. The people standing near the dungeon saw the system's message about the Dark Emperor's exploits, which they envied and couldn't quite believe, because he was alone and went through everything so quickly. Reading the inscription on the stone about disasters of the morning level, the girl adjusted her glasses and said that she was afraid that they should prepare for the worst, because soon the world would be engulfed in chaos. Meanwhile, Lin Lo was looking at the lottery and thinking that he might win something valuable thanks to the abilities of the Prayer Lord. The guy couldn't believe that among other things he had dropped a cosmic crystal, because with its help, he could return to the real world, and it was an S-class inventory. Crushing 2 crystals in his hands, he thought that the cosmic crystal might be 7% more valuable than the others, because the others act directly. The boy took 2 magic crystals for himself and gave 2 crystals of life to the Dark Emperor, who was now looking at them and listening to what his master was saying. Law continued to look at his inventory, seeing that he had 2 more Wheel of Fortune tickets and 275 fortune shards. He decided to collect another 10 tickets, as it would be more profitable. The guy looked at his equipment, realizing that he needed to sell it as soon as possible because it would be worth more that way. But after a few seconds, his mouth dropped open in surprise, because what he put up for sale was bought in a second, and he received $5 million in real money. But now he was unhappy, because he had underestimated the rich and had to sell items one by one to get more for his money. He thought he would have to stay here all night to reach level 20, and then when he exited the game, he would be able to get an S-level item. Lin Luo mentioned 3 clans that emerged after the era of chaos and were notorious. One of the leaders of the clan of 8, Byung Hun Lee, according to Lo, who introduced him to him, did not even carry an umbrella in the rain, but a knife. And among the dozens of guards of the Great Tomb, Ji Wan Ying, the Blood Witch, and Liu Jiangying, the Ice Rage, made huge contributions to the protection and development of the clan. And the leaders of the Smiling Coffin, Zhou Yu, Hu Jinming, and Guo Tao also contributed greatly to the development. And all of these leaders are masters who have awakened S-level abilities. Lin Lo smiled contentedly, thinking that if he defeated them, he would be able to go straight to the City of Sin. Xing, who was in charge of the Crouching Tiger Villa, sat staring at the monitor. He lamented to himself that it was no longer so profitable to send people out to work according to the old scheme. But the guy thought that now that he had officially registered his company, it would be easier for him to steal the loot, as he was used to. He was smiling a little crazily because he had come up with a scheme to recruit people, give them jobs for a while, and then force them to join teams. He considered himself a genius. Looking at the message on his phone, Shin smiled, because another fool had taken the offer and now he would be able to close the network, and his boss would definitely praise him. The first on the 11th floor of the Tower of Babel were skeletons. The system quickly provided data about them, saying that their passive skills were a rusty sword that dealt damage to the player even after combat. Law looked at his double's back, thinking that from the 11th floor you could get some equipment, and on the 10 levels before that, only fate fragments were available. In his past life, he and his brother had been here often. He ordered the Dark Emperor to attack and leave no one behind. After the Dark Emperor's 2-handed attack, all the skeletons were scattered by his strength and attack speed. And on the skeleton of the horse sat a level 17 skeleton general who had already noticed the Dark Emperor and was attacking him. Lin Lo hit the skeleton general with all his might, before asking if he was looking down on him, since he was only level 13. The general recoiled from the force of the blow to the jaw. After going upstairs and receiving 85 fate shards, the boy smiled and thought that he had 3 years to hone his skills. 8 minutes later, a skeleton lord stood on the 20th floor, blocking the way up. He looked very scary and was staring straight at Law. The skeleton lord had the ability to summon from hell, among other things. Raising his sword, he shouted, calling on his brothers and subordinates to leave hell and fight for him in this battle. All the skeletons he had summoned began to crawl out and appear one by one on the floor, each crawling towards Lin Lo and his double, trying to get there as quickly as possible. Taking out his blade, the boy thought that there were more than 200 skeleton warriors here, and the level was much more difficult than the other 19. The attack began, and all the skeletons moved towards the boy, and the one on the horse skeleton ran, pulling his sword from its scabbard. The Dark Emperor began to repel the attack decisively and using all the strength he had and had gained while they were climbing up to the floor. While the double dealt with the higher-ranking skeletons, Lin Lo stood in the middle of the circle of ordinary skeleton warriors, gripping the hilt of his blade. Gritting his teeth with the realization that his strength might not be enough and he might suffer serious injuries, he held the blade out in front of him. The Lord of Prayers he summoned appeared immediately after the summons, holding a staff and a book of wishes and prayers in his hands. Lin Lo shouted, wishing for the Dark Emperor to attack and deal double health damage to his opponents. He ordered the strikes to continue until the Skeleton Lord was defeated. The Lord of Prayers began to cast a spell, using his book and scattering the radiance of his own power around him. He announced that the Master's wish had been fulfilled. Lin Luo couldn't believe that he could actually make such a wish. Meanwhile, the Dark Emperor spread his arms to the sides, feeling a surge of strength bestowed upon him by the Lord of Prayers and Wishes. The Skeleton Lord lowered his sword in surprise, not understanding what was happening. The Lord of Prayers opened his mouth at what was happening, and Law began to swing his blade, ordering the Dark Emperor to move forward and assuring him that he would take care of himself. The double began attacking the skeleton, pressing forward with its attack and forcing it to defend against the double attack. The Skeleton Lord looked at the pile of dust that rose when he threw the Dark Emperor away and said that this was what happened to those who crossed his path. Lin Luo visibly tensed when he saw this, calling out to the Dark Emperor and peering intently into the dust in front of him. The next moment, the Dark Emperor appeared again and attacked again, putting the maximum of his own strength into his blow. The guy smiled contentedly, saying that he knew that everything was fine with the Emperor and that he had not disappeared. The Skeleton Lord was losing health hit after hit, always losing minus 580 points when he missed the Dark Emperor's attacks. He was already lying on the floor. While the Dark Lord combined maximum attacks, Lin Luo swung the wedge and confidently walked forward, thinking that he had found an effective way to make a wish. The boy put his hand on the Dark Emperor's shoulder, telling him to leave everything behind. They had already reached level 14, and the Skeleton Lord was dead. People who were following the news said that this was too much, and that he had climbed 20 floors by himself. But someone started telling them to back off, because he must have been beaten half to death by now. Next was the 21st floor, and the Dark Emperor quickly and with smooth, honed blows defeated the boss of this level. The Dark Emperor had already passed the 25th floor, waiting for a new opponent, while Lin Luo led him through the maze of floors 21, 30, taking turns to make it faster. They passed the 29th floor. They stood in front of the door on the 30th floor, the two of them. The system notified them that they had not reached the required level to defeat the boss, so it recommended that they come back next time. When the Dark Emperor resolutely walked towards the door of the next level, Lin Luo smugly said that the system should stop giving him advice. Before them was a level 30 monster, a Minotaur King, already waiting for their arrival. As the two of them stared at the boss, the boy thought about how he had been waiting to meet the boss of the level and finally be able to use his looting skills. The Minotaur looked down at the boy, laughing at his level 15 and asking if he had any idea what awaited him here. With a smile, he asked if he really understood correctly that the Minotaur's labyrinth was a real trap. The monster looked at the boy in surprise, not understanding what was happening. Still smiling, the boy said he was ready to fight the Minotaur, summoning the Dark Emperor. The double's hand appeared from behind Law, reaching for the monster. The Minotaur swung sharply, taking his weapon in both hands to put the maximum of his strength into the blow. The Dark Emperor flew straight into the sledgehammer the Minotaur was swinging at him. While the double attacked the Minotaur, fighting to pass the levels, Lin Luo thought about the fact that there was no need to go from floors 21 to 29 quickly, because everyone would be reborn and come to the Emperor's call. The Minotaur brought his sledgehammer down on the floor, which cracked from the force of his blow. Bright sparks of his power flew in all directions. The guy watched what was happening, thinking with a smile that many had fallen into this trap, but he had his own plan, which he had built on his past failures. The Lord of Wishes appeared after being summoned and asked for a mission. Lin Luo ordered him to help him and the Dark Emperor deal damage with double force. As soon as the Dark Emperor's fist touched the Minotaur's muzzle, hitting right on target, the Wish Lord said that the Master's wish would be granted. The king took a little damage, but it was already doubled. The Emperor struck simultaneously, one after the other, without stopping for a second. When his nose was already bleeding, the Minotaur realized that things were not as easy as he thought. He began to call for his warriors to be reborn and come to his aid. As soon as Lin Luo noticed that the boss upstairs had launched an attack, he stretched out his hand, releasing his own power and not taking his unblinking gaze off the opponent. He ordered the Emperor to begin the plan. Having activated most of the skills that took away health and agility, He now stood on the Minotaur's body, looking down at his defeated enemy. Lin Lo looked pretty crazy, his eyes wide as he stared at his own hand, which was sparkling with power. He said it was an incredible feeling, without addressing anyone in particular. Having reached level 18, the boy turned his head discontentedly towards the door, from which monsters summoned by the Minotaur poured out, screaming death wishes. Raising his hand with force at the tip of his finger, the boy said, addressing his warriors to act on his command. He ordered them to retreat. The mesmerized Minotaurs dropped their sledgehammers, gazing at their new master with glowing eyes. All the warriors summoned from hell knelt and bowed their heads before their new ruler. At the same time, in the secret Mushroom Kingdom, which was a dungeon for beginners, one guy was shouting, using a force that would force them to their knees. The level 8 Mushroom King knelt down, looking at the one who had bent him to his will. Yu Taijie stood in the dungeon and said that he had finally found someone of his level, and said that he had heard a lot about the Teruo couple. Squinting at the stranger, Theo Ruo asked who he was and why he wasn't afraid of his Emperor's Eye ability. Coming closer, Tai Ti introduced himself, saying that he lives outside of time and is the very person who can make him stronger. It was noticeable that Ruo was surprised, asking about the phrase man out of time, while he looked at the hand extended towards him, palm up. Taking the boy's hand, Taiji said he needed help, answering the question of why he had come to Master Ruo, and also because he could bring any monster to its knees. Meanwhile, the Minotaurs from Hell, now under Lin Lo's control, bid farewell to their king in unison. Satisfied that the plan had worked, Law smiled and called the Dark Emperor to come out and act on the plan. As soon as the double appeared again, he immediately received the command to go forward, which he did. In a second, everything around was flooded with the light of the power of the Dark Emperor, who mown down the Minotaurs one by one. Law coughed, saying to himself that there was an incredible amount of dust around here. As the boy walked past the people, they were talking, not believing that the Dark Emperor had reached level 30 on his own and raised his level to 22. Law smiled with satisfaction. He thought he could now reach a completely different level of ability and his own levels. Lin Luo stuffed both cheeks with noodles while sitting in one of the city's restaurants. He thought that the second-level dungeons would be more difficult, and the experience of his past life could not be used, so he had to eat a lot. Law looked back at the sound of the girl's voice, seeing a picture of some boy waving his hand at a girl, visibly unhappy about something. The girl sat on the floor and looked fearfully at the three boys who were confidently pressing against her, getting closer and closer. He remembered how colleagues talked about his brother being a thief and joked that Lin Lo himself would steal something from them if their desks were next to his. The girl, whose cheek was burning from the blow, folded her hands in a prayerful gesture and begged for forgiveness, saying that she did not know and did not want any of this. But the man said there was no point in apologizing because she had ruined everything and stomped on her face. Law, while eating in silence, glanced sideways at the girl, thinking that she was probably already dead. While one of the boys was asking for more noodles, the leader of their gang said to bring the girl to him so she could continue to treat his wounds. The third one shouted at the beaten girl, telling her not to pretend to be dead because everything was fine with her, and quickly went to the owner. He kicked the girl across the body to get her up faster, but she said he hadn't done that to her before when the captain was here. He poked his finger into her battered face and asked if she really still considered herself the leader and where she was now. The man, taking the girl by the t-shirt, dragged her along the floor behind him, saying with a smile that she used to be the captain's dog, and now she was their dog. While chewing and trying to ignore the scene next to him, Law thought that everyone had once been on good terms, but the world had changed a lot, as had the relationships between former friends. Sitting at the table, they discussed the need to add another player to the team because they still had to complete the second level of the Tower of Babel. Next to their head sat a beaten girl, using her power, which glowed green. She continued to heal her master. The man said with a smile that it had been a long time since they had seen each other, holding his plate of soup. He called out to Lin Luo as he came closer. The girl asked again, not believing what she heard. Was it really Lin Lo there? While he was eating, the ex-colleague put his hand on Law's shoulder and asked where he had been since everyone was reborn and that he missed him a lot. It turned out that it wasn't soup, but seafood that the man put in front of the boy and told him to eat as much as possible and not sigh so heavily. He whispered and asked what ability his colleague had awakened and promised a lot of money. After all, who else but Luo was worthy of Wen Yuchen's team? When he defeated the captain in his past life, John Wen contacted him and suggested working together, and the guy talked about his F-level robbery talent. Then all those people laughed at him and the fact that even his talent was connected to robbery, and the girl then generally said that he needed to be taught a lesson now. Lin Lo got up from his seat and left, but turned his head to his former colleague and said that he was not looking for a team. But he only laughed, calling Lo a poor boy and asking if he really wanted to become as legendary as the Dark Emperor. The boy walked away, barely holding back from saying something unnecessary, but the girl rushed towards him, shouting for him to wait. Falling to her knees and clutching his leg, she sobbed, begging Brother Lo to save her. The girl said she would let him do anything if he would save her. The girl took his hand and, with hope in her eyes and a little blushing, placed his hand palm down on her chest. She called him again, calling him brother and telling him to take her with him. Lin Lo abruptly pulled his hand away, clenching it into a fist with emotion, and said that the girl had mixed up something and he was definitely not looking for a partner. Wen Yuchen was already rushing towards them, dissatisfied and insulting the girl, saying that she was trying to seduce everyone she saw and that she didn't really need Lin Luo. Wen grabbed the girl by the hair and she screamed. He asked if she really thought Luo had enough strength to save her. The other two began to mock Lin Luo, discussing the fact that the girl thought he was of high level, but they were certain that his level was lower than theirs. While hurting the girl, Wen Yuchen said that he would have stolen something from the Wen family if he had known about their mercy to the two robbers, and that he and Wen Yuqi were made for each other. Lin Luo looked at his former colleagues with displeasure, saying that he recommended that they not say those three words. Chen looked at his ex-colleague with a sly smile, still clutching the girl's hair and asking what the three words were. Coming closer and whispering, he asked with a smile, "Is it really Alphonse and Wen Yu?" He called him a scumbag who knows he can't jump higher than his head. Leaving Lin Luo behind, Chen pointed a finger at him as he walked to his colleagues, telling them that the boy didn't understand that times had changed and suggested showing World of Fists. They were visibly pleased with the offer, clenching their fists, and one even wanted to try out the items from the dungeon he had just obtained. Rushing towards the boy with the strength that sparkled in his fist, one of his ex-colleagues told him not to think that the inspector would save him from a fight, and that if he didn't want to die, he should get on his knees and ask nicely. But the fists of both men did not reach the target. Lin Lo threw his arms out to the sides, hitting both ex-colleagues in the faces and sending them flying several meters away. While the girl opened her mouth in surprise, Law thought about the fact that he had lived 2 lives and knew better than them what the world of fists was. He glanced sideways at those lying on the floor. Chen was visibly irritated and angry, asking if 2 strong players really couldn't beat that scoundrel. Taking out his blade, he angrily rushed at Lo, shouting for him to die quickly. The guy effortlessly stepped aside, avoiding being cut. And then, with a smile, he struck several blows at Chen, who visibly winced in pain and did not expect such force. Lin Lo looked at the bunch of losers in front of him, but all he could think was that they were just a bunch of weaklings and he didn't even want to get his hands dirty with them. Both boys fell to their knees, hands folded in prayer, addressing Law as their master. They offered themselves as teammates, saying they were ready to do all the work. Looking them down, the guy repeated that he didn't need a team, but emphasized that they clearly still didn't believe him. They began to apologize for what they had done, and one of them even beat his forehead, bending as low as possible just to beg for forgiveness and life. The man with a cup of hot drink watched through the blinds gathered under his fingers and thought that he couldn't believe that such a strong person worked in such an eatery. Returning to his guards, he ordered them to find an intelligent person to look after the boy. It was Bin Hongli, one of the leaders of the Clan of 8. The boys were on their knees again, saying they understood when Luo told them they had to stand in the position when Zhang Wei woke up. They swore they understood. When he passed by the girl, she thought in amazement that he was an incredible man and that it was a great fortune to meet such a strong man. She grabbed his pants, saying that she had been rude before, but her boss had forced her to do so. She said that she knew he didn't hold a grudge against her. Law was visibly irritated by her, telling her to calm down. Putting his hand to her face, she told him to take her with him, and that she would atone for her mistake tenfold. She couldn't believe he had turned her down. Even opening her mouth in surprise, the girl had heard Lin Lo tell her to behave herself. Left behind, she clenched her fist, thinking about the fact that scumbag Lin had left again. Both boys began to mock her, asking if she really thought she could seduce anyone and that she shouldn't take any chances because their captain Lin had only one woman in his heart. Beaten and abandoned, the girl screamed, asking how she was worse than this Wen Yu. They started laughing loudly and forcefully, saying that the girl was not worth a finger of Miss Wen Yu and that the girl was of lower grade. When she told them to repeat, finding the strength to stand on their feet, and the boys said that Lin Lo was gone and that now no one would protect her. One of the boys thought that Law had hit him so hard that he had lost all his strength, while the other was confident in his victory over the girl. Noticing this, the girl smiled and thought that this would be her great chance to get revenge. At the screams of another boy, the girl slapped one of them in the face, saying that she would return all his kindness 100-fold. She asked where he had the strength to resist and whether he wanted to die, while she slapped him in the face again and again. One of the leaders of the clan of 8 watched with a smile, telling himself that the girl was quite unusual. Another man said that the girl was incredibly beautiful, and Bai Hong Li asked if he should invite her to their team because the brothers were complaining about the lack of female players on the team. Sipping his drink, he calmly said to ask her about that guy and find out as much information as possible. He wanted to find his weak spot. As she stepped on her abuser, the girl smiled. She told Lin Luo, although he couldn't hear her, that one day she would step on him in the same way. Interrupting her, the man apologized for interrupting and asked if she had heard of the Clan of 8. She asked if it was the most famous team of players. He said they were looking for active players and suggested she join them. The girl folded her arms happily, saying that this was what she had dreamed of. With a satisfied smile, she thought about what Lin Lo would know now, that she was in a cool guild, and that this was the difference between rich and poor. He told Qin Xiaomei that from now on they were family, placing his hand over his heart as a sign of respect and brotherhood. And then he asked who the guy who just left was because he was so rude to her. She started talking about how he liked to manipulate people's feelings and that he was on her team. She glanced sideways with interest when she heard the question about weaknesses and how they might take revenge on her. Xiaomei didn't think long. She said that his weak spot was a woman and her name was Wen Yu Chen. While the boy was walking, an unknown person followed him, telling someone that Lin Lo was going to the eastern part of the city. He was ordered to continue and not to lose the boy under any circumstances. While Lin Luo was walking away, his pursuer was talking on the phone and mocking the girl that the boss of the Clan of 8 had brought down to their lair, saying that the boss knew what the brothers needed. Without giving any indication that he had noticed the pursuit, Lin Luo thought that the boy needed it if he was following him. The guy received instructions over the phone, telling him about Lin Luo's weak spot, and then he was told to draw the guy's attention to someone named Wen Yu Chi. Turning back, Lin Lo tried to see if the stranger who had followed him when he entered an alley was following him. Seeing the one in front of him, Law smiled, wondering who was so bold standing in his way. Passing by the stranger, who was a little scared, Law wondered if he knew him and if they had met before. The pursuer was walking on when the Dark Emperor appeared before him, forcing him to shift all his attention to himself. And the next moment he was flying back from a blow that landed right in his jaw. When he fell to the ground, Lin Lo was already standing above him with the Dark Emperor behind him, asking who had sent him to follow. Lifting him by the hair, Law heard that the guy was just walking by, but said that he had been following him from the noodle shop, so it definitely didn't count as him walking by. Looking closely at the earring in his ear, the boy couldn't believe that this beaten-up wretch was from the Clan of 8. He thought about his past life. Thinking that the Clan of 8 shouldn't have appeared before him so early, he expected them later. Taking the beaten man by the face, Lin said that he had one last chance to tell everything. But the man stood his ground and said that he was just passing by and didn't even know who he was. The guy thought that in front of him was most likely Dead man. The lowest level, and there was no point in asking him anything. Lin Lo summoned the Lord of Prayer, who appeared immediately behind him. The boy voiced his wish, that the boy would tell him the true purpose of his persecution. He began to tell me that he was serving under General Park Hong-yeol of the Clan of Eight, and that they had a beautiful girl who told him about their best player, Lin Lo. And then he explained that his next task was to find someone by the name of Wen Yu-chi. Lin Luo pondered, wondering if the Clan of Eight had really taken Qin Xiaomei in. And then he said that his master wanted to blackmail Lin Luo with the help of Wen Yu-chi so that he would become a dead warrior of their clan. He thought that Xiao Mei was a slut and that she had really caused him more trouble than he expected her to. He recalled that in his past life, after Sister Wen's death, he was in constant danger in order to improve his abilities and be able to fast Hong Li. Looking back at the boy who was currently being beaten by the Dark Emperor, the boy thought that in his past life, he should have killed Bai Hong Li before the Clan of Eight got to Sister Wen. Squinting at the Dark Emperor, who had already thrown the body over his shoulder, Law ordered him to get rid of the body. And while he was carrying out the order, the boy turned to the wish granter and asked how long it would take to fulfill the wish if he wished that the Clan of Eight would not attack Wen Yu-ki. Thinking after his doppelganger's answer, Lin Lo realized that 24 hours was enough for the wish to come true, so he said that he had had enough. The Lord of Prayers heard the command to fulfill the wish and immediately said that it would come true. Walking ahead of their group, Lin Luo thought with a smile that they should first go to the second part of the Secret World walkthrough. He stood in the secret world of the League of Assassins and thought about how surprised he was at how quiet it was. Desmond Miles, the mentor of the second-level assassins, said with a smile that he felt the power within the boy and asked if he was ready to explore high-level secrets. Thinking it was a familiar NPC character, Law bowed and then said that when he was ready, he should contact his mentor. After receiving instructions to bring 30 snowman antlers and 1 king penguin beak, the boy said that of course he would return alive and unharmed. Trying to cover himself from the snow with his hands, Law thought that the level of this secret world was much higher than the secret level of the second level of the dungeon. Suddenly, a level 20 black snowman appeared out of nowhere in front of him, staring directly at the uninvited guest. Turning around, the boy wondered if there should be a monster in this part of the dungeon, and if it would even have enough strength to attack Law himself. The Dark Emperor, having received the instruction, launched an attack on the snowman, using his own power to restrain and defeat him. While his doppelganger was fighting the snowman, Lin Lo saw exactly where the snowman's horn was, which he needed to get. As soon as his master ordered him to attack, not just hold back, lest he reach the boy, the Dark Emperor went on the attack. When the fight was over, the two of them walked on, and the Emperor asked if it had worked out. Lin replied that they had gotten what they wanted. Many snowmen appeared around them, seeing the horn that the boy had been holding. Taking out their blades, they stood back to defend and attack. Law said that the real battle was beginning here and now, and asked if the double was ready. The double answered without hesitation. The master said that they were very slow, so they would win, but the Dark Emperor only agreed, already absorbed in the depths of the battle. Swinging his blade and biting his tongue in concentration, the boy attacked, telling himself that it would be nice if the snowman's horn fell out of this group too. They were standing in front of another snowman when they took the horn, which raised its arms and roared at them, trying to intimidate them. The Dark Emperor appeared next to the snowman with a sharp movement and punched him in the jaw. And then he stood there, unable to believe that he had lost his hands. The monster asked, astonished, how they had managed to do it. At that moment, Lin Lo ran to the Dark Emperor, shouting for help without even turning around. Running, the boy jumped onto the double's folded arms, pushed off from them, and now flew closer and closer to the monster, never taking his eyes off it. And the next moment, Lin Lo cut the snowman in half with his blade, going from the head to the very bottom. Returning to the double, the boy ordered him to finish off those who were lying down and were still only unconscious. The Dark Emperor began his attack on the snowmen, walking from one to the other and acting with incredible speed and killing without delay. Lin Lo checked how many snowman horns they had collected during this battle, seeing that they had already collected more than 30 pieces, which were needed in the task. Turning his head towards the snowmen, He thought that they were very strange because they killed and killed them, and they still didn't stop. He couldn't understand what was wrong. The crowned monster, with wine in his hand, asked how those people dared to attack and said that he would now show them what they really needed to kill. It was the king penguin. Raising his glass of wine, he ordered his subordinates to respawn and attack. The boy looked at what was happening in front of him, not understanding what had happened, because a bright yellow light appeared in front of him. Above the king penguin's flipper, this light began to grow and cast rays in different directions. Linlo stood there as if he were standing still, watching as the snowmen's horns began to rise into the air one by one thanks to those rays. A black hole began to appear there, into which a beam shone and where the horns disappeared one by one. Breaking the protective dome of ice that appeared after the rays disappeared, a huge snowman emerged into the light, with horns all over his body. Looking at all this, Lin Luo wondered to himself if the king penguin had gathered all his strength and used it to summon just one warrior. But then, preparing for the monster's attack, the boy remembered a fact from his past life. This monster was impossible to kill. Running under the feet of the huge monster, Law called out to the Dark Emperor, ordering him to follow him. The double, catching up with its master, took him in his arms so that they could quickly break away from the summoned monster that was running after them. King Penguin, meanwhile, used his powers again, summoning others and urging them to be reborn as well. While they were running, Lin Lo had a plan and asked the Dark Emperor to throw him to the top, showing him exactly which one he needed. And in a second the boy was flying to the top, carried by the force of his double. Drawing his blade, Law swung in mid-flight, extending his arm to control the fight and the first strike. He hit the king penguin in the face with a blade, and in the meantime a golden crown flew off his head. He looked with a smile at what he held in his hands, the beak of a king penguin, and thought that the task was accomplished. The boy looked at the piles of something black that remained from the snowmen, and on each of them was a crystal that had to be retrieved according to the task. He stood in front of Desmond Miles and held out what he had taken, saying that he had completed the task. The Level 2 Assassin Master said that he finally admitted that the boy in front of him was truly strong. After taking out 3 cards, he said that he had 3 assassin abilities: Noble Rogue, Apostle of Darkness, and the One Who Runs on the Wind. But that wasn't all, and there were secret specializations, and asked if the boy wanted them. He leaned forward a little, saying that of course he wanted to. He thought to himself that he had only come here for the secret specializations. The mentor told him to remember that changing specialization incorrectly would lead to death and asked if the guy really wanted it. With a smile, the boy said, bowing slightly, that it was worth it to acquire a new profession, even if he had to die. Desmond Miles laughed after this answer, saying that Lin Lo was the first person to want to get a second profession so much. The guy became noticeably more serious, thinking that in a past life people could get a second profession so he himself could too. Stretching his hands out to the boy, the mentor of the assassins released red-black threads of power, saying that now there was no turning back, nor any regrets. Now Lin Lo stood in the middle of the wasteland where Desmond had sent him, remembering his words, where he had said that it was here that the boy would find the answers he was looking for. Miles looked at the boy slyly and told him not to be shy and to choose. Holding his hand out of the way of the light, Law wondered if this was a wasteland. Standing in the middle of the portal's light, he spread his arms out to the sides and said that there was nothing here at all. And a second later, when he tripped over something, a pillar of power and light appeared in front of the boy. Looking around, he said to himself that now everything was clear to him. Those things, one of which he tripped over, were his future professions, but they had different colors. Putting his hand on the red one, Lin Lo saw that it was a dissident who had impunity and a fusion of good and evil. It was she who was recommended by the Lord of Prayers. The blue power meant the shadow profession. Among the skills there was the possession of a shadow, which could be divided and also cursed with it. Here the buffs were greater. Taking his hand away from the beam, the guy realized that the color meant the level of coolness of the profession. He turned to the golden beam, deciding that it was probably the best. Standing before the golden light, he saw information about the legendary profession, the Storm Swordsman, which gave the cool supersonic sword, the Spirit Sword, and the Hurricane of Swords. Lin Lo's mouth dropped open, unable to believe his eyes, because the profession was legendary and he had never heard of it in his past life. He thought about how, having gained such an ability, he could repel the Clan of Eight and wondered what the trick was. Not understanding why the Lord of Prayer hadn't told him about this ability earlier, Law immediately summoned him. He appeared in the same second. He asked why he was lying, while the Master of Prayers thought to himself that it was hard to trust a liar. Holding a scepter and a book, he asked the Master, even if he had to lie. The Lord of Wishes and Prayers said, visibly nervous, that Lo would be suitable for Dissident because it was the most optimal option for him. The double showed the chances of mastering the profession and the chance of keeping it, which were 1 and 0.5% comma, because the owner asked him about it. While the boy was thinking, the Prayer Lord showed the Shadow's stats, which were about 20% for development, but 9 for exchange. The double said that the figures were better, but not the best they could be. Lin Lo asked to show the percentage of Dissident. The double spread his arms wide and showed almost 100% success in mastering the profession. He said that this was the safest choice of all. The guy said that there would definitely be no problems with the Dissident, and the double thanked the owner for finally understanding what he was telling him. And then he asked why the Lord of Prayers thought he needed a safe choice. He thought of the most effective one for himself. The double looked at the owner in surprise, even asking what he had said. And then the owner of the Desires listened to what the host said, so that he would remember that he should show the options, and not choose them for him, as happened this time. Lin Luo turned and walked towards the beam of golden light that was a few steps away from them. And then Lo asked if the success of mastering 1% would then allow him to squeeze the most out of the profession, and heard that it would be 100% of the potential once he mastered it. But he warned that in the event of force majeure, his forces could be weakened for 20 days or worse. The guy calmly, and even with a slight smile, asked if he was talking about death. Lin Lo said that it didn't matter whether he mastered the profession or died. He would still be abandoned by others. And then he stretched his hand closer to the wish-giver, saying that he had forgotten about himself in this whole story. Saying that he was making a wish, the boy walked towards the golden light. He wished to successfully master his profession. Shouting that he understood that this was all part of his plan, the Lord of Prayers began to grant wishes. He raised his scepter high. He sat in the golden glow, his eyes closed and in no hurry. Desmond couldn't believe it was the Stormblade, and he couldn't believe the boy had chosen her. He was standing on his doorstep, all in his own power. Lin Lo stood and listened as the assassin's mentor said that even an SSS class couldn't master this ability, and that's what would happen next if he managed to do it now. Sitting within the golden light, the boy heard the instructions of the prayer master, who said that one must understand the true essence of storm and death. Loyalty to the sword, wind, and storm. The guy playing the flute stopped playing and looked straight at Lin Lo. He, having taken out the sword, remained true to himself and thought that the wind would protect him and become his sword. Standing in front of the horde of monsters, he smiled. He began to wield his sword, scattering monsters. The wind became his sword, a sharp current that strikes hurricanes. The boy knew that to understand death, he had to face it. Before him stood monsters and a skeleton holding a sword. The long-haired boy was serious as he drew his sword, the one and only sword of the storm. While Lin Lo was gaining wisdom, the Lord of Prayers said, holding on with his last strength, that he had almost no strength left and that he was falling asleep again. As he left his master, who was in a trance, he gave instructions to him to remember that he could only trust himself. The boy was thrown out of the golden stream. Blood was pouring from his nose, and he spread his arms, unable to regain his balance. He lay face down, collapsed in front of Desmond. It was clear that the boy's life was hanging in the balance. The assassin's mentor said he knew that and that this was the boy's reward for wanting to jump above his head. And then he looked at the system, which said that another master of 2 professions had been born. With a smile, he said that if the guy hadn't made it difficult, he would have become the only one in the world, and it was a pity that he had been overtaken. Raising his head with a smile, covered in blood, Lin Lo stood up and said that he was the only one in the world. Desmond was visibly shocked by what he heard from the boy. Sitting on the sofa, he watched the boy drink the potion, realizing that it was a potion of complete recovery and that it was probably thanks to it that he had received a new profession. Meanwhile, Law had noticeably improved. There was no longer any blood on his face, and he was still smiling as he looked at the mentor of the assassins. He started screaming, demanding answers and a story about how it all turned out. But instead of answering the question, the boy calmly told his mentor that he was on fire. Surprised and a little confused, he looked down, where the carpet on which he had previously dropped his cigarette had already begun to burn. While Law was walking towards the exit, Desmond started jumping on the spot, trying to cool off both the carpet and himself because he was so damn hot. Luo walked away, thinking that Lao Qi had fallen asleep because he had killed Bai Hong Lei, so he had to hurry to complete everything according to his plan. When he went outside, the boy checked his messages and saw that it was Xiao Mei. She had invited him to eat and reset her geolocation. He smiled and thought that she was so caring, and could it really be because of the Clan of Eight? He sent a reply to the girl's proposal, thinking to himself that he couldn't wait to get there tomorrow. At the same time, Xiao Mei was sitting on one of the leaders of the Clan of Eight, saying that she was glad that everything was finally happening for them. She wanted to check the message that had come to her phone, but Bai Hong Li told her not to be distracted. He took the smartphone from her. Seeing that it was Lin Luo and that he had suggested meeting today and reset his geolocation, Bai Hong Li told her to clean up while he went to the meeting. The girl, left alone, gritted her teeth and fists in hatred. Lin Luo always ruined everything for her. Two men stood in front of the monolith, reading that after midnight the rat catastrophe would occur, as the first of their two professions would appear in the world. They didn't know what to do. The old man said she needed to prepare, prompting the younger boy to say he understood what was going on. Lin Luo sat on the sand by the bay and looked out at the night bay. He looked at his phone in surprise, reading that a curfew would be in effect starting tomorrow and that no one was allowed to leave their homes after 8 p.m. The guy was surprised because even though the curfew was introduced due to an impending disaster, why 5 days earlier than usual? While waiting, Lin recalled that the first wave that appeared in their world were insects from level 1 to 20. Then everyone received 4 times more experience, and the guilds rose noticeably. Raising his head to the sky, he thought that this time it would be much more difficult than that time, and that then everyone who fought had fought very hard for 15 days without a break. He lay on the sand and threw his hands behind his head. The guy thought that he had failed to protect those who had protected him in his past life, and he simply dragged them with him. But he thought that this time he would finally be able to protect everyone. Thinking back to his childhood, Law thought he was quite stupid back then because he laughed when it hurt, but didn't understand much. Then the girl would pull his hand, telling him how funny he was, and would always take him to treat his wounds and always do it herself. The boy recalled that Sister Wen had taught him a lot. She used to treat his wounds and tell him that he would grow up and learn to deal with it on his own, but the little boy said that he would still need her. Then the Wen family took him in even though he stole from them, and the girl said that he was so short, just a shorty. He remembered how the girl congratulated him on his protection and brought him flowers, and he blushed. This was when Social Security took him away and he lived far from her, but he always looked after himself. He remembered how the girl had said that he should work hard, and now all he could think about was that all the good moments were connected to her. And then it all disappeared. Then she was lying face down on the floor, covered in her own blood, not moving. He was lost in his hatred and desire for revenge, roaring the name of Bai Hong Li. He promised that he would finish him off soon. They were driving in a car, heading towards the location that Lin Luo had indicated in his message. Xiao Mei was in the front seat, and one of the leaders of the Clan of Eight was in the back. When he answered the phone call, he said he had received the information. Bai Hong Li was very focused on what he had heard. And the girl wondered if such a powerful man as the master really had anyone to fear. She glanced sideways at him, but was afraid to turn back. The master heard the order to prepare, as the engagement of Princess Yoshiko and Miyamoto would take place in a month. It was obvious that he was frightened. Hearing that Miyamoto had awakened SSS rank powers within himself, Bai Hong Li became angry, wondering how he could steal from him. The others believed that he was strong enough to take back the country. He thought he had to find all the crystals and rise to SSS rank by the end of the month, because Princess Yoshiko, as well as the clan of 8, belonged to him. And now he was thinking about whether Lin Lo would be strong enough for the task of finding the crystals that Li would then use. He told Xiao Mei that he was giving her a group of guys to follow Wen Yu Ji, because as long as she was under his sights, Lin Luo would be working for them. He said he would stay in the shadows now and warned her not to say a word about him if she met him. She agreed, as she was using him to sneak into the clan of 8 meeting. The man smiled with satisfaction, saying that she was smart because she already knew and remembered everything. The boy was lying with his eyes closed and on the beach when the girl approached him. She thought with a smile that she had dealt with the head of her former clan and that some Lin Lo would be a very quick reprisal. Qing Xiaomei put on a mask of kindness and with a wide smile called him, calling him Brother Lin Luo and waving her hand. The boy sat down on the sand, looking with mute surprise at the fact that Xiaomei ran towards him and was so happy. The next moment she fell to the sand, face down, sprawled out in front of Law. She started shouting that it was because of Lin Luo's brother that she fell, looking a little offended by it. He was already standing over the girl and, with a grimace of disgust, asked where Bai Hongli was. Blushing a little, she said she had no idea what he was talking about, and she tried to figure out how he even knew the name of the clan head. Leaning towards her, who was visibly frightened, he repeated, Bai Hongli, and explained that he was the leader of the clan of 8. Trying not to look him in the eye, Xiao Mei said that she had indeed joined the clan of 8, but she had never met the clan leader, only heard his name. Turning around, he walked away and told her not to make him dizzy when the girl screamed, asking him to wait. While he was looking at something on his phone, Xiao Mei told a story about how she hadn't seen the clan head, but had asked to be accepted there. While he dialed a number and waited for an answer, the girl continued to say that this was a great opportunity and that he would have girls, money, and cars. After getting out of the car, Bai Hongli picked up the phone and said that she had been assigned to monitor Lin Luo for a long time and asked why she was only calling now. But it wasn't her. Lin Luo said with a smile that it was only now because he had just killed her. Bai Hongli couldn't believe what he heard, asking if it was really him, Lin Luo. The clan leader was visibly irritated. He was angry at the order to come out of the shadows because Law knew he was nearby. Qin Xiaomei cringed, asking if he knew everything from the beginning, but the guy simply replied that he knew everything. The leader of the clan of 8 began to laugh as he emerged from the darkness and said that he had chosen a truly wonderful ability. He smiled and told the boy to join the clan and that he would have a great future, but Lin Luo didn't even smile. He asked if he was talking about his plan to rebuild the country, smiling for the first time since meeting Mei. He mentioned Kudosawa. Bai Hongli's mouth dropped open in surprise, asking how the guy knew about this. Drawing his blade and letting the power swirl around him, he said that they were only human and that each of them would die. At that moment, the Dark Emperor appeared, making a loud sound. While Lin Lo watched the clan leader's reaction with a smile, his double reached out with a ghostly hand towards the figure. With a quick and precise movement, he struck Bai Hongli, knocking him back. They both ran away quickly, Xiao Mei running even faster than Hongli. The masked blonde was fighting the Dark Emperor, who was currently attacking her, trying to break through her defenses. Lin Luo gritted his teeth, not understanding how Bai Hongli managed to keep up with the Emperor's speed and not lose concentration, because it was his double who was fighting for him now. Standing next to the Emperor, the boy said that their tactics were good, but the double would lose its power once its master died, so they still lost. Bai Hongli laughed, saying that his double couldn't even break through his double's defense, yet the guy attempted to kill him. He thought to himself that he would not be able to withstand the enemy's strength for long, so he needed to destroy him as quickly as possible. Hongli thought that his double's strength had noticeably decreased, although it had not been damaged. However, if the master was reborn, the probability of defeating the enemy would noticeably increase. They both looked at each other, realizing that they needed to end this fight as quickly as possible. He ordered Kaguya, the doppelganger, to switch to rainy night mode and ordered her to change swords to kill Lin Lo's doppelganger. The boy told Lao Chi that the double of Hongli should not dodge the blows of the Dark Emperor. The latter said with a smile that it was done. Kaguya attacked the Emperor with her sword, racing to carry out her master's order. Hongli was so scared that he opened his mouth because the double was targeting him. Even if Kaguya hit the double, it would still hit him. He decided it was time to enter the fight himself. Enraged, the leader of the clan of 8 wanted to start a fight and ordered his double to kill the body of her opponent's master. But the next second, Bai Hong Li staggered back from the Dark Emperor's punch. Blood began to flow from his mouth. Lin Luo looked up, seeing Hong Li's double swinging her sword at him, almost right next to him. The clan leader mocked Law and his double, asking how he could possibly think that his fist was stronger than their sword. Kaguya swung her sword, but it fell to the ground without hitting anyone. She was surprised, and her master asked how an ordinary person could have such speed and reaction. Appearing behind Hong Li, Lo said that he recognized his ability to wield a double and his speed. But in this world, the clan head was puzzled. And the next moment, the Dark Emperor appeared before him, raising his fist to strike him. As the Emperor's fist descended to the ground and raised dust, Lin Luo said that in this world only the victors would survive, and the vanquished would die. Standing over Hong Li, the boy said that in a past life he had managed to avenge Sister Wen's death with his own hands. Stretching out his hand, he began to use his power. A new skill opened up to him at the level called robbery. But then he started thinking that he needed more level skills, because at the moment he couldn't use plunder and had to choose a boost from his inventory. And then he was able to use it by extending his hand. The system immediately warned that he had become the owner of the Rainy Night ability. The girl, standing under an umbrella while it rained, silently looked at her new master, ready to follow orders. He continued to think that the talent provided both strength and attack when used in conjunction with a double, and its attack speed was much higher than the Dark Emperor and had good compatibility between defense and attack. He looked at Kaguya, who was waiting for his orders, and thought that her intelligence was 30, so she could fight on her own without control. Law also thought about the Dark Emperor's intelligence, which was only 1, so he always had to be watched and given orders. He told the girl with a smile that he hoped for a productive and good collaboration between them, and Kaguya only bowed and said that she would protect him until her last breath. The guy wondered if the inventory had exploded this time, because he had the opportunity to pick up what had dropped after killing his enemy. He looked at the Wheel of Fortune ticket that was the only one left after Bai Hong Li's death. Thinking that it was just in time, and he could win the inventory, the boy took it for himself. The boy began to call out to Lao Tzu, but the Lord of Prayer did not answer. He thought that his past desires had exhausted him so much that he could not even call out. As they walked, the girl asked the host if they would now go to the secret world. But the guy just rolled his eyes, saying that they had more important business to attend to and would be going to a completely different place. The girl thought about what had happened, because her brother Kudo never turned off his phone. A maid entered her room and said it was time for the elders to arrange a meeting with Mr. Musashi. The princess thought that those old men wanted to marry her off to some warrior to renew their war. Sitting on the bed and waiting calmly, the girl thought about whether it would be better if he didn't come back at all. She recalled how she and her brother lived in China for a year under assumed names, going out and doing whatever they wanted. It was the best year of her life. She was so anxious to hear from her brother that she almost cried. The girl thought that if he were here, he would definitely take her with him, and they would run away. Standing outside Sister Wen's house, the boy thought that once news of Bai Hong Li's murder became known, the clan of 8 would no longer need to follow the girl and she would be safe. He narrowed his eyes in displeasure when Kaguya asked if the master really liked Wen Yuji. She said with satisfaction that she could probably be called his girlfriend, if that's the case. Lin Luo started to blush and make excuses that he didn't, but the girl kept pushing and asked if she could be his future girlfriend. She said that the host seemed to be staying here all night, and that this girl, Wen Yuji, was very important to him. Returning to the house, he smiled and said that it was true, she was very important to him. Lin Luo remembered how his older brother and sister Wen were always there and called him after them. He clenched his fists in anger and thought that in this life he would never allow what happened in the past to happen again and would protect his loved ones. Putting aside all the good emotions, the guy told her that she had to go. The double asked where they were going, surprised by such a decision. Without even turning around, he said that they were going to the Holy Land to make him stronger. Having reached the right place, the guy greeted the police officers and said that he needed to go through. One of them started teasing him, asking if Lin Lo would have enough strength, since it was a high difficulty level. But the boy replied with a smile that he would. When he heard that he had to share his personal information, he created a black envelope that was wrapped in light blue power. They looked at the name of the Dark Emperor in surprise, saying that it was so popular now. Another asked if he was the Dark Emperor who had won so many battles one after another. The guy said it was really him and asked if he could pass. The guards said yes. One of them said that you shouldn't show off in front of the girls, because you can only come back to life 3 times. It wasn't worth it. That made Lin Luo smile. They watched the boy and girl as they entered the Holy Land, and one of them said that people like him should be called heroes. Kaguya, holding the sword, looked at her master, and he received a message that she had reached level 8, having killed 8 level 30 monsters. The girl swung her sword confidently, slashing at monsters from all sides while their eyes flew nearby. He and the Dark Emperor just watched the girl fight. Lin Lo sipped his cocktail, thinking it was a good thing he had brought Kaguya with him, because she understood the rules of the game. The girl said that she had destroyed all of his enemies in that area. When the battle was over, she folded her umbrella. Praising Kaguya, he said she was a good girl and explained the essence of the task. They needed to help the elves destroy the invaders of their world. He said that the fragments that the elves grow on the tree are the same as the superpower crystals, and those trees can restore the player's energy. The doppelganger asked if she understood correctly that if they helped, they would receive gifts from the elves, and the boy said with a smile that this is usually how things happen. He sadly thought that in another life, the humans had come up with a plan where they killed the monsters when the elf defenses were almost down, then collected twice as many crystals. But he said that in that case, they would be waiting a long time while he looked ahead. Kaguya asked what exactly they would be waiting for. He replied with a smile that they would wait for a convenient moment, and he thought that receiving a small reward could be as nice as access to exclusive resources. One of the elves shouted that the defenses had fallen and that they must retreat. Lin Lo ordered Kaguya to go ahead while he ran himself, and as he ran, he said that now they too must join the battle. The level 35 monster captain commanded terrifying monsters, but it wasn't for long. Lin Lo laughed as they went on the offensive, saying he had gotten much more than he had expected. The captain screamed, asking how the man could take his food and saying that he would die right now. And the next moment, he commanded the Lord of Prayers to awaken, using one of the crystals he had obtained from that tree. Lao Tzu said that he had incredible strength and thanked his master. He informed the Lord of Prayer that the Dark Emperor was coming next and that he would attack until the leader of the monsters died. Lao Tzu complied. The monster leader swung, clenching his fist and going on the attack. He ordered Kaguya to change into the form of the Sword of Rain and that they needed to help the Dark Emperor, as his attacks and her help would allow them to win. Immediately submitting to her master's will, she dropped her umbrella to change the appearance of the sword. Monsters hold their maces and batons, trying to attack. Kaguya helped the Dark Emperor by attacking monsters. When the monster leader was dealt a lot of damage, he began to activate some of his power. A funnel of light began to appear. He began to shout that this was the destructive light of death, and that his doppelgangers should beware and not fall under that light. The girl opened her umbrella, reflecting the light the Monster King directed at them, and protected herself and the Dark Emperor standing behind her. Lin Lo analyzed the situation, seeing that this attack had taken away a lot of Kaguya's energy, and even the Dark Emperor had lost a certain amount of energy. Plucking one of the crystals from the tree, the boy ordered the Dark Emperor to use the pause and attack, as their opponent was not fighting at full strength. The Dark Emperor clenched his fists, feeling the power bestowed upon him by the crystal his master had used. While they were fighting and dodging, a system message came that Lin Lo had mastered the destructive light of death by 30%, as well as strength and agility points. After the king was killed, Law received 9.5 million points, as well as 200% of that, and was able to activate the opportunity to gain another profession ability, 10,000 swords. Swords began to appear from open portals around him, activated by his new power. Raising his hand, the boy ordered the swords to fly forward and attack, watching as they followed his command. He was pleased because the attack power had increased and the combat power had not decreased with the double strike, but he was somewhat confused. He was very unhappy and confused because if they stopped attacking for even a second, they would take a lot of damage. Linlo mentioned that when a mage reaches the first level, he can choose to restore magic or absorb magic. He thought that thanks to the first one, he could restore his strength, and the second one would help take it away from the monsters. He thought about the fact that they had the time and opportunity to choose the ability that would be most useful. The guy didn't want such an ability to be used as a backup plan, but it could be used once. Lo stood by the tree and wondered how many more crystals he would be able to knock out. Holding more than 100 fragments in his hands, the boy happily thought that it was equivalent to 5 SSS-level supercrystals. Now he was thinking that there were also disadvantages to skipping levels because there might be fewer crystals on other levels. Law smiled contentedly, saying that it seemed like it was time to use his 10 Wheel of Fortune scrolls. He summoned the Lord of Prayers. Appearing, he bowed, greeting his master. Hugging Lao Tzu, the boy offered to eat the recovery crystals, and that he regretted having to expend so much energy to save Luo. He offered to add 1 point to the wish. After listening to the prayer lord's suggestion, Lin Lo threw the tickets up, summoning the Wheel of Fortune. He commanded that S-level items appear, but without the recovery potion. He held the Golden Legend, which cooled the SS-level crystal and made it possible to reduce the recovery time after battle. While he was taking the power of the crystal, the boy thought that thanks to it, he would be able to obtain 2 more professions of S-level and above. He was also looking at the intelligence crystal, which could increase it by 10 units at once. Lao Tzu suggested giving this crystal to the doppelganger who needed it most. The guy asked the prayer leader what exactly intelligence points could give, but he explained that intelligence is not the same as wisdom and cleverness. It is the ability to solve problems very quickly, and the higher your intelligence, the faster you absorb new knowledge and experience. He thought about the Dark Emperor attacking with brute force, but the monsters are getting taller and their powers are greater than the double, and are putting him in a bad light. Linlo decided that the Dark Emperor needed this crystal the most. Approaching him, he told him with a smile to take the crystal. The Dark Emperor looked at what was in his hand. After crushing the crystal, the Dark Emperor thanked his master for his care, placing his hand to his chest in a gesture of gratitude. He said that he would do everything to ensure that there were no obstacles in Law's path. Law said that he wouldn't need help in battle when he grew up, and the Dark Emperor just agreed with his master. Now the boy thought that the gain in experience points was not as fast as when using robbery directly. The Lord of Prayer held green crystals in his hands that were supposed to increase the life energy limit, which Law gave him and asked to find another S-level ability for him. Lao Tzu crushed the crystals, now absorbing their energy with a smile and feeling his own limit changing. Near the school, a boy was pushed so hard that his back hit a trash can. He was bleeding profusely, and the boy asked the others not to go so far. They were classmates. The school gang leader said with a smile that the boy had already awakened his A-level abilities, and that one day they might leave him alone. The guy got to his feet and, with a slightly crazy smile, asked if the gang leader wasn't doing too much when he called upon his ability. The fire that was now burning on his clothes and not burning. With a fist surrounded by flames, the boy swung at the leader of this school gang, remembering the last time, where there were punches in the face and how he didn't budge much when he wanted to urinate on his head. The leader summoned his abilities, which spread out like tentacles, and one of them caught Yang Yun's hand. The bandit asked if he really thought he was the only one who kept his true level of ability a secret. The boy screamed, "How is this possible? Because so many normal people can't get an S-level ability, but this young thug was able to get it." Tentacles were holding his hands and feet. He tried to free himself, thinking that the Tao was far superior to the devil himself if that were possible. Lin Lo, looking at the pictures that showed him these very scenes, smiled contentedly, and his eyes flashed red. The next target was robbery. Tao asked the boy, calling him Little Yan, why he didn't go crazy like he had before. They said they needed to contact Brother Joe directly, and asked Yang if it was fair that he had an A-level and his brother had an S-level. The boy screamed, trying to free himself, but he heard what Tao said. He had to go with them to make amends to the Green Demon. But they were interrupted. causing Dao to turn his head away from his classmate at the sound. In front of them stood a teacher who said that the boy had no right to bully anyone, including his classmates, because he had acquired a high-level ability. Yang Yun tried to say something, but only called out for the teacher because one of the tentacles was squeezing his throat. They called out to Dao Zhou, frightened that the teacher had come, but he only told them not to panic. The girl was frightened when the student said he had nothing to worry about, even though she found out by pointing the demon's tentacles directly at her. She screamed, asking loudly with fear in her voice what he was doing as the tentacles began to wrap around her body and restrict her movements. Licking his lips, he stood nearby and said that he knew the teacher admired people like him and asked what she thought he wanted to do to her. She started to blush as one of the tentacles began to crawl up the inside of her thigh, higher up under her skirt. Jan shouted that his classmate was a monster, but he looked crazy. He said, without taking his eyes off the teacher, that when he had fun, he would come back to finish him off. But suddenly one of the tentacles holding the teacher was severed. The boy looked in surprise at the person who had done it. It was the girl with the sword. He asked who else it was. And then Dao saw that his followers had also received blows to the neck, now falling unconscious. He started defending himself, telling them to get out of here because they were acting like complete idiots. Lin Lo and Kaguya smiled when he asked if he was Zhou Yu. He said he didn't remember anyone else at school having an S-class ability, so he asked a little scared who he was. At the call, the Master of Prayers appeared, smiling contentedly, opening his book, and said he would do anything. At the same time, Lin Luo said with the same smile that someone would be in a lot of pain in 30 seconds. The guy started screaming, spitting out who he was because he was visibly afraid of what would happen next. But Lin Lo only said that it didn't matter and that the boy had 3 seconds to think of his farewell words. The guy screamed, asking if it was his face and if he didn't have a double, but gave him a few seconds to go away, because then he wouldn't be responsible for himself. He looked at the schoolboy with satisfaction, ordering the Dark Emperor to go into battle. The little one was already scared when he saw another doppelganger and asked how many Lin Lo had in total. The Emperor looked down, watching the tentacles that had begun to wrap around his legs. Satisfied that he had managed to capture the enemy's double, the boy asked him if he had many more, and ordered the green demon to kill the Emperor. Seeing this, Lin Lo just laughed, calling out to Kaguya. The girl began slashing at the tentacles with her rain sword, making her way right up to the boy. Seeing that things were going badly, he started to lie that he was also a victim because Yang Yun was bullying his brother. At that time, the boy himself clenched his fists in anger. The boy started shouting for Zhou Luo to stop talking nonsense and lying. But Law didn't believe it. He said that Zhou was simply worthless because he had such power that would help fight evil, but he was using it wrong. And that's why he would die, and even the police wouldn't bother him. Frightened, the boy began to turn to the teacher, asking her to save him because he wanted to enter university so badly. When she said nothing and just looked behind the student, he even stopped asking, widening his eyes and realizing that this was truly his end. Lin Luo activated the robbery ability, thinking that he hated people like Zhou Luo the most because he used his powers not for the good of humanity. The boy that Law had saved came up and awkwardly thanked him, then asked if he wanted to say something. But the only thing he said, looking at the boy, was the name of his double, calling him and attracting his attention. And then he took his doppelgangers and, waving goodbye to the boy, told both doppelgangers that they were going to get a bite to eat. To Lo's delight, the boy said that one day he would be just like him. It was clear that he had found a new idol. Sitting in the cafeteria, Lin Luo studied the ability he had taken away in surprise. He was confused as to why the description was so general and lacking in detail. Determined to understand how the ability worked, the boy awakened the green demon. He focused on learning the skills. And then he smiled, because it was a cool feeling, as if he had a dozen arms and they all moved freely and he had control over them. But the boy thought it was no wonder that Kaguya killed him with one blow, and the Dark Emperor's attacks did not cause any damage. However, the Emperor had his own unique abilities. The guy stretched with satisfaction, saying that they had resolved all the issues, and now he could treat his doppelgangers to fried chicken. The doppelgangers began to thank and happily say that eating the chicken was a very wise decision, and Kaguya even said that it was her favorite food. Having ordered everything that his doppelgangers and himself could eat, the boy sat back in his chair contentedly and said that he would have to wait a bit. A waitress ran up to them and asked if he had ordered 300 chicken rolls, 300 burgers, 200 pieces of tender beef, 100 cod burgers, and 400 bottles of cola. She said that their restaurant didn't have that much food. Lin Luo was dissatisfied and told her to carry whatever they had. While he was waiting, the boy thought that in 6 months the food problem would become global, and he remembered that the space crystal would store food from the moment it was moved into it, so he would need to stock up. Kaguya told the host to look outside, where the weather was getting worse. Next to her, the Dark Emperor was also looking out the window. He was looking at his phone and saw that this was a rat-level disaster, a plague of insects that had arrived from another dimension. A woman rushed into the cafe with her son in her arms and began screaming and begging for help for her child. The woman screamed as the claw of a huge insect caught on her t-shirt and pulled her back out into the street. A huge spider loomed over the mother and her child, its mouth wide open and all its teeth bared. Lin Lo stood in front of the woman and child, to her complete surprise, and looked at the spider with a smile. Calling upon the Lord of Prayer, the boy made a wish for the white smoke around him to dissipate. He said it would be done. Now he attacked using his power when the fog was gone and Law could see his opponents. Standing over the body of the spider monster, for which he had gained experience and extra points, he thought that he wouldn't get any items, but he would get 4 times as much experience. Giant flies were already flying towards him while Law calmly waited for them. He called the Dark Emperor and Kaguya, saying it was time for them to go out and kill monsters to raise their levels. Kaguya fought quickly and killed left and right, and the system notified her that she had received 8,000 experience points for killing a level 3 locust. The Dark Emperor fought alongside her, killing a locust of the same level, and received 64 experience points, including 800% experience. Yu Taiji said, looking at the fusion of a stranger and a praying mantis, that it was dangerous for ordinary people, but for those with abilities it was a great fortune. The man asked if it was because they gave 4 times more experience than is usually given for killing such monsters. He was saying with satisfaction that yesterday the Emperor had reached the 2nd level after obtaining the 2nd profession, so the rat disaster had come sooner than expected. They all looked at the praying mantis, and Tai Tzi said that they were all ready to form a team, and by using the insect's abilities, they would be able to reach level 20 and move to the 2nd circle of consciousness. The man with long hair willingly went outside, saying that then they would see who would gain the most experience in killing these monsters. Law thought that after a certain period of time, the insects no longer sought the light, and there were fewer of them here. But this was temporary. That was why he did not relax. He ordered the Dark Emperor and Kaguya to guard the place while he himself had to go on some business. Upon entering the cafe, the guy asked if his order was packed. The girl and guy hiding behind the counter timidly said that yes, everything was already packed. Lin Lo said that no one would be looking for them for the next 10 days, but recommended that they not leave until they were rescued, and that they would survive if they saved money, as they had water and food. A woman and a child asked to take them with him, but he said they would be hurt if they went with him. He told them to turn off the lights and figure out how to close the windows. He said that people can only hope that China will come to the aid of its citizens, much to their surprise. But Lin Lo wondered why he had such a bad feeling and whether he had missed something. He thought that all this started because of his obtaining a 2nd profession and rebirth, and he was afraid that Sister Wen would not be able to handle this invasion. The man with long hair began to attack with a smile, saying that the God of Heaven was here summoning his double. They crushed one of the insects, pinning it to the ground with force. He extended his hand to the lovely girl he had saved from the insect and asked her what she was willing to do to repay the poor monk. Keitaro used his power, using the Emperor's eye, and asked if the monk needed help. Mr. Liu said that he was scared to try something new at Keitaro, but Keitaro just smiled and asked if he was here to help the monk. Another guy said that the monster had been defeated and asked Tai Tzi if he minded if he reused its remains. The boy sat down next to the insect and, using his power, summoned it for the sake of its emperor, ordering it to appear again. Liu asked Tai Jie if this was the same shadow control ability and said that the partners he had found were indeed very powerful. They were all now looking at Lin Lo as he ran past them. The men wondered if he was just like them, gaining experience. Another said that the boy had managed to break out and escape. But Tai Jie looked at the stranger and said not a word. Luo ran as fast as he could. He thought that according to his predictions, Sister Wen should have survived the disaster. While knocking on the door to check if his family was safe, he heard a girl's voice asking if Yu Ji had returned. The girl opened the door, not believing her eyes and asking if it was really Lin Lo. He asked where Aunt Li and Sister Wen were and why she wasn't home. She said that Aunt Li should have returned home and Yu Ji wasn't home yet either, and she couldn't get through on the phone because of the fog outside. Lin Luo was furious, thinking that Sister Wen had definitely not returned, and something must have happened. He started telling her not to open the windows and doors and not to respond to any noise. It was obvious that he was nervous, but her aunt still agreed. The boy went to look for his aunt and sister, thinking that without a second combat ability, fighting monsters was a direct path to death. He hoped that Yu Ji was safe. In the fog, the Dark Emperor called out to the master and said that there was a person here. He pointed to the girl who was unconscious and covered in blood. Lin Luo said that she could no longer be saved and thought that the scale of the disaster had increased, and Sister Wen had to be found as soon as possible. He ordered Lao Chi to immediately tell him where Wen Yuji was. The boy looked under his feet, where a kind of map appeared, showing him and Wen Yu and where to find her. Meanwhile, one of the girl's colleagues grabbed her head and began to lament that the end of the world had already come and that they were all going to die and that no one would be saved. He began to scare the girls, saying that God didn't just lock them together because he wanted them to die together. The girls told him to calm down because they didn't want anything from him, and another girl even said she wouldn't look at him even if he was the last person on earth. The guy started yelling at the girl, telling her to shut up and that he would now be the one looking down on her. Another girl started grabbing the guy's hands, telling him to let go of the girl. But he only swung and slapped the girl with all his might, knocking her to the floor. He said he would do whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted, and asked them to let him die without pity. The girl was sobbing, begging him to let her go. Tears of helplessness welled up in Yuji's eyes. But the next moment, the boy hit her in the face, giving her a noticeable slap, and ordered her to shut up because he would punish her. Lying on the floor, she looked at the door, saying that insects had gotten in here. And the next moment, the boy leaned back, blood flowing from his nose. Behind Wen Yuji was Lin Luo. She was surprised, not turning around and asking if it was really Brother Lin. The guy looked at the girl with a guilty look and apologized for being late. Turning to the boy who was still alive and asking what was wrong with him, Lin Lo only called out to the Dark Emperor. And a second later, the villain was kicked in the face by Lin Lo's double. While the unfortunate man was screaming and telling him to let go, Lin Luo calmed Sister Wen, hugging her and holding her close to him so that she would feel safe. The boy screamed, demanding answers about what he had done to the girl, deaf to the pleas to let him go. When he agreed to say it, the Dark Emperor immediately let go of his neck and threw him against the wall. And then he hugged Law's legs, saying that he had misunderstood everything and that he had done nothing to the girl. He begged for mercy. With red eyes and looking very demonic, the boy asked if that was all. While the girl was hiding in his arms, Lin said that he was giving the boy two options. Either he would beat him to death, or he would go outside and meet his death there. He ordered him to choose. The boy started running, thanking his brother for letting him go. Sweating, he said he would choose the street. As he walked outside, Lin Lo told the prayer bearer standing nearby that he wanted to make a wish, to be attacked by 200 beetles in 5 minutes. Turning around with a crazy smile, he thought that the guy was an idiot and that no one would survive if he broke the glass. But the next moment he was caught by the tentacles of the green demon, and the boy screamed, not expecting this. He found himself on the asphalt and saw angry beetles heading towards him, having already noticed him. The insects immediately attacked him, digging into his body with their teeth. Stroking the girl's hair, Lin Lo reassured her, saying that everything was fine now and she was safe. She raised her head and asked Brother Lin if he had really let him go, but the boy said that he couldn't do that because he had offended the person most dear to him. He said that the guy would die from the screams of angry bugs, and even then, he would only pay 1% of what he had done to her. As the girl thanked her, Kaguya asked the host if she would now become his girlfriend, causing Sister Wen to blush. Blushing, he shouted at the double to stop talking nonsense while Yuji turned away. But Kaguya stood her ground, saying that he had said that she was the most precious person to him, making them think. The double asked the owner if he didn't like the girl at all, and he just scratched the back of his head and tried to find the words. The boy began to make excuses, trying to do everything so that his sister wouldn't think anything bad about him under her unblinking gaze. Yuji put her hand to her mouth, and during this drama her colleague regained consciousness, having hit her head after being hit by that guy and passed out. Seeing this, the girl ran to her, hugging her neck and rejoicing that she was okay. And then she saw Lin Luo and started yelling at the girl that he was a bully under Luo's cheerful gaze. But the girl began to calm her down, telling her not to worry, that this was her friend. His name was Lin Lo, and he had saved them. And then he came back and seriously said that they couldn't stay here and that they needed to leave. The aunt who opened the door was incredibly happy to see Yuji. Right on the doorstep, she asked if she was okay. The girl threw herself into her mother's arms, hugging her tightly and starting to cry. Auntie asked how Wen Wen was doing, and Yu replied that she and Lin Luo had taken her home and made sure she was safe. The woman thanked little Lo with a smile, and he blushed. Wen Yu asked where her father was, but her mother replied that he was a civil servant, so he was where he should be. Lin remembered that Uncle Wen was working at the stationery center in Hansen when they last saw each other, and it was interesting why he was called to work. Standing up, he said he had to visit his uncle at work, because there the insects could easily get inside. Both women's mouths dropped open. He asked his aunt not to worry about him and said that he would definitely be fine and that he would bring his uncle home safe and sound. Standing near the center, Lin Lo thought that it looked as if a herd of beetles had already walked over it. As he walked inside, the boy was worried because he could feel the energy of the place. He thought that level 20 insects couldn't feel it, but he could feel it clearly. His eyes widened as he saw before him the guardian of all the hell that was happening here. He saw the funnel from which these insects emerged and understood that their level was higher than usual because they were near the progenitor. He thought he had to kill the ancestors' guards to complete the catastrophe, and in his past life those who finished off the guards were surrounded by other people. The guy ran away to prepare to fight the thing, then decided to come back when he was ready. The men in the office ran away in fear, warning others to run and save themselves, while the huge insects ran after them. The man ordered the employee to block the door with a closet, because if those insects get into the room, they're dead. Even with the door locked, the men saw insects hitting the door and making huge dents in it. One of them was holding his head, scared to death, while the other covered his mouth with his hand and tried to even breathe as quietly as possible so as not to attract attention. They turned to the door in surprise when they heard that it was Brother Lin who had killed one of the insects. Opening the door, they saw a smiling boy waving and telling Uncle Venya that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. The men stood before the portal to the Holy Land, but none of them could believe that the Dark Emperor had passed through it first, because it takes a lot of strength to do so. Yu Taijie was angry, gritting his teeth, because he couldn't believe that player did it first. He was angry because that player took away his strongest awakened one, and also the secret worlds ended earlier. One of the company asked why the Dark Emperor took so long to clear the secret world, even though he knew he went there alone. The monk said that the boy looked so much like him, and that he definitely came from the future. The monk agreed, but said that he still didn't know how he managed to take his power away. He turned and walked away, saying that they didn't have much time and that they still had other worlds to explore. TZE didn't believe that the Dark Emperor could wipe them all out. The aunt and uncle asked where the boy got such strength from because he looked more like Superman from the movie. He told his uncle that it was simple and that he had simply awakened S-level abilities. Wen was visibly surprised, saying that abilities of this level could really do such a thing because he had a D level and his aunt had a C level. Putting her hands on the boy's shoulders, the girl said with a smile that she was still better than him. She had an A-level ability in nature sounds. While the boy was trying to think of something after the question about his abilities, Wen Yu told his mother that she shouldn't ask a stranger like that. The woman apologized, but said that Brother Lo had grown so much that she couldn't get used to it. He said everything was fine and told him about the power of heaven ability, which gives him an increased attack in battle. The girl said he was incredibly cool and asked him to take her in the dungeon with him when he went there, because she was afraid to clear it on her own. Saying that the boy should seize the opportunity, Uncle Wen thanked him for saving him and said that the boy could stay, as they had a spare guest room. He started to say that it was inconvenient, but Wen Yu didn't want to listen. She took his hand and pulled him, telling him to just stay with them for the night. Uncle Wen said that he once lost touch with a boy from the orphanage, but today he saved his family. Sitting on the bed, the boy thought about the fact that he had saved his entire family in this life. But he couldn't stay here for long because he still had to save his brother. He didn't want to leave this house, but he still needed another S-level double to fill in the gaps in the plan. The man right in the insect colony smiled contentedly, saying that he would sow fear and despair in all living things. He summoned the demon of despair. A demon of despair appeared from the portal, immediately roaring, saying that he smelled a wonderful scent. The man sat contentedly on his knees before the demon, rejoicing that the SS-level double was now his. The demon told him to sacrifice all his despair and fear to his ears, and then promised to grant him unprecedented power. While he was looking contentedly at his double, who needed a sacrifice, his little daughter sat nearby, calling out to her father in fear. Before that, he told his daughter to stay home alone for a while because he needed to go to the store to get some things. She agreed and said she would wait for him. The child watched as her father walked out of the room, leaving the girl alone with the monster. Huddled in a corner, she hugged herself and her toy, starting to cry and calling for her father. Standing on the roof of the building, Lin Luo thought that with the ability of Smiling Coffin, he had killed 15 people. But 2 more people had awakened abilities of the same level. He told the prayer leader standing nearby that he wanted to know the whereabouts of Hu Jintao. After he received the answer, the boy jumped off the roof and cheerfully announced that hunting season was beginning. The boy shouted in satisfaction, rejoicing that this SS-level ability could increase itself and he didn't need to break anything to do so. He chuckled, saying that he wouldn't care who would laugh at him now, and he would make the woman who had abandoned her husband and child regret what she had done. The demon leaned over, calling the boy a slave, and said that the monsters did not give him enough strength, and the fear they instilled was not enough for him. The demon explained that he needed human fear because only it replenishes his energy completely, to which the man froze in place and asked if he was really suggesting killing people. Using devilish whispers, the demon asked if his servant wanted even more power. Completely subjugated by the demon, the man shouted that he would do anything for his master. In a hole in the wall of the house, a couple, the man holding his wife and a knife in his other hand, asking who the hell he was and what he wanted. The man asked if they would fit, and the demon was already saying that the smell of this fear was so intoxicating and wonderful. Ordering his wife and child to flee, the man rushed at the monster with a sword, just to buy some time for his family to escape. But at the same second, the woman covered her mouth with her hand, watching as her husband was killed before her eyes. Having feasted on the man, the demon said that the power of human fear was much greater. He licked himself, satisfied with what he had eaten. The man looked at the doppelganger he had fathered and wondered what kind of monster it was. The demon drank everything, creating something resembling a mummy from the body in a matter of seconds. And when he finished, he turned his attention to the woman and child, saying that this was not enough for him and that he needed more fear. He growled, showing all his teeth and making a loud and drawn-out sound. But the demonic slave appeared before the woman, covering her with himself and telling her to stop because she had summoned him to get rid of the monsters. But he was immediately pinned down by the monster's paw, which squeezed his chest and hurt. He said that he was a disaster, born of fear and despair in the soul of the man himself, and when he regained his strength, he would thank you with immense power. And then the boy flew down, and the demon ordered to get rid of the crowd, and as quickly as possible. He opened his mouth in surprise when he heard that his task was to kill that woman. The guy started arguing, saying no, he refused to do it in any way. But the demon now looked green, using his power, and ordered it to be done immediately. He was guided by the power of a devilish whisper, so the man ran towards the woman, holding out his hand in front of him to reach her as quickly as possible. He took the knife that had been left by the stranger's husband and held it in his hand. The next moment, he raised it up. Lin Luo had just appeared, observing what was happening on the street. Dirty and mad, the boy turned to the visitor he had heard. He recognized him standing over the body of the girl he had killed. The Dark Emperor and Lin Luo looked at each other with a look of anger and rage. The boy ordered that this monster be killed. The Dark Emperor launched an attack, mobilizing all his forces, which now swirled around him in a whirlwind. The demon said that it was the first time he had met a person with such energy, and that he himself seemed to have plunged into despair and fear a lot and often. The Emperor began to defend himself from the attack initiated by the demon, telling them both to leave. The demon roared, saying that otherwise he would feast on Lin Luo. The demon attacked with his fist, but ran into something that was Kaguya's umbrella. She stood in front of Lin Luo, protecting him. The demon tried again, using his abilities and trying to break through the defense and get to the boy. Watching his opponent, the boy thought that the demon was damn fast, and that if it weren't for the double, he wouldn't have had time to react. Summoned by its master, the Dark Emperor struck the demon in the face, damaging it and distracting it from its master. Realizing that he was stronger than the Dark Emperor, the demon raised his fist and, screaming for him to die, began to attack. While watching the battle unfold, Lin Luo told Kaguya that she needed to use the Nightstorm sword, hinting that she should do so as quickly as possible. Saying she obeyed, the girl jumped, transforming her powers and awakening the Nightstorm. Saying that they were all like ants to him, the demon scattered both of Lin Luo's doubles, telling them to get away. The boy caught Kaguya, who screamed from hitting her master. The demon raised his hands above his head, clasping them together, and said that now the end would come for this doll. In desperation, Lin Luo screamed, summoning a green demon. It immediately appeared with tentacles near him. The demon asked, looking at all this, what the hell was this guy doing? The tentacles constrained the demon's movements more and more, preventing it from moving. And at the very moment he couldn't move, the girl plunged the sword into his stomach, holding the hilt with both hands. Watching the demon fall, Lin Luo asked him with a smile if he thought he was good at close combat. The demon said that he could not die because he was people's main fear, and as long as they felt him, he lived. Law said that he would bow his head at his feet the next time they met. As they stood there, he thought about how Kaguya's attack had succeeded because her powers had synchronized with the Dark Emperor's, and it had been pure teamwork. The man who had summoned the demon began to wail, standing on all fours, and asked what he had done. He couldn't believe he had killed a person, looking at his hands and repeating it over and over again. Lin Luo was red-eyed again, and asked the man what his last words would be before he died. He fell face down, bowing and saying that he didn't want this. His mind wasn't his, and he didn't want to kill anyone. The guy seriously said that there would be a price to pay for the murder, and as long as he was alive, there was always a chance that his double would wake up again. On his knees, he agreed to pay for the murder, but asked to protect his daughter and say that her father had left and would return when she grew up to visit her. After being punched in the stomach, Law leaned over and whispered in the man's ear that he shouldn't worry and that he would take care of his daughter. With tears in his eyes, he smiled, thanking her for such a favor. Looking at the bloody asphalt, Law read that he had activated robbery again and was wondering what he wanted to choose this time. He thought about the devilish double and how it could retreat and bend its master to its will. And if he chose soul power, he could rise to the SS level. While he was taking away the ability, he thought that he would also not be able to subdue such a force if even Hu Jinming could not. The boy was looking at the message that robbery had earned him an SS-level ability called Emotional Detonator. He realized that the ability could enhance the double's attack, so he shouted, summoning a new minion. In front of him was an egg that fit in the palm of his hand and was now glowing with a bright red light. The boy did not understand what it was and where his demon was. The boy looked at the egg, wondering what the hell it was. He wondered if the double could really be formless, but the information said that it would absorb any emotion its host gave it. He stood above the city and looked down through the fog, thinking that it was so thick and there were bugs below. He called out for help, for someone to save him. The boy closed his eyes, realizing that these were not his thoughts. He only then covered himself with the strain. He fell to his knees and exhaled, thinking that it was a good thing that the ability only lasted 5 seconds, because there was too much information and emotion. He thought that Hu Jin-min had chosen fear for the emotion of this egg for a reason, because there were a lot of monsters on the streets, but with certain uses, a devil's double could be born. Staring at the egg, he decided he should wait until the emotion sensor cooled down, and then try again to see if he had any other options. Lin Lo hid the egg in his pocket and called upon the Lord of Prayer to tell him where the man's daughter was. The little girl sat on the floor in the dark, hugging her toy and being afraid. She kept asking where her father was and why he hadn't come back yet. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door and the man told Hu Xin Yue that he was a friend of her father. The girl came closer, asking questions. They sat at a table piled high with all sorts of fast food while the girl asked her brother Lin when her dad would be back. He said that Dad would be back later because he had to leave to protect Hangzhou, but he said that Dad had asked him to take care of her. The girl screamed, saying that it was cool because her dad was very strong. The boy asked if she thought he was cheating on her, but the girl said that her ability was to feel emotions and that there was only kindness in little brother Lin. She said that's why she trusts him, because he's really a very good friend to her dad. Saying goodbye to the girl, he thought that as soon as the fog cleared, he would find a good family for the little one. Going outside, the boy thought that there were many people like Hu Ziming in these times of chaos that reigned on the streets. The boy walked on, thinking that all human values had lost their least meaning. He wanted to help the whole world. Lin Luo thought he would become the king of all China and help the people by creating a safe environment for protection. Anyone who gets in his way will be reduced to ashes. The 5 people returned to Linmin Temple walking up the stairs. They looked ahead, and Lao Yu said that judging by his memories of a past life, there really was a guard in this temple. The monk said that first of all, before starting the mission, a captain must be chosen. The guy wondered to himself whether it was just him or Liu Tianshi wanting to nominate himself and claim leadership. Lao said that the Dark Emperor had serious abilities, but he could not recall anything from his past life, so he asked to leave his quarrels for later. The monk asked if he thought too highly of the Emperor, since he had never heard of him in his past life. Hugging the boy by the shoulders, he said he would help him kill the Dark Emperor that Lao feared so much, but he asked if he could become captain in return. Lao said that the Dark Emperor had taken his powers, and he would get them back sooner or later, with or without the monk's help. While Lao was thinking about his powers, Lu thought that he should not let the other man regain his powers, because he would take all the power for himself again, and he would not have a chance. Returning to the eagle, Lao asked it to check if anyone was nearby. The eagle readily agreed to follow the command. He said that about 1,000 meters away from them, the strongest one was a level 7 mantis. The monk asked what he was going to do and what he was doing now, because he said that the catastrophe had begun earlier and the place where it appeared had shifted. Lin Lo ran as hard as he could to where the disaster was, just to make it in time. He was looking at a level 34 monster whose health was many times greater than that of a level 35 monster captain. But after studying his information, Law told himself that he was simply huge and had the ability to summon, but there was nothing else terrible about him. The guy said that he was counting on the Dark Emperor and Kaguya because their abilities could complement each other. They had received such an ability not so long ago. The Emperor attacked again, but the system notified that the opponent's body was covered in something from another world, and his powers were invalid against him. In surprise, Law even opened his mouth, wondering if that guy was really that strong. And then he turned, even more surprised, when he heard a sound and tried to understand what it was. Mantises began to appear around, flying from everywhere, and Lin thought he wasn't sure he could fight them off. But then he calmed down, telling himself that it didn't matter, because the bigger the storm, the more expensive the fish would be. He called his doubles. When they spoke, he drew his blade and held it out in front of him. Law ordered the doppelgangers to use their swift wind swords. There were reporters on the streets of Hangzhou filming a story about what was happening there. The girl was talking about the white fog that had engulfed the entire city. The cameraman showed where to look, drawing the reporter's attention to something. She immediately began to talk about everything she saw. They zoomed in to get a better look at the monster in the middle of the city, but they saw a man on its back. She said that this was impossible, And although their world had entered an era where more and more heroes were appearing, the level of the awakened ones was still low, so how was he fighting a monster? Meanwhile, Linlo, the Dark Emperor, and Kaguya stood back to back, waiting for another attack. The guy thought there were too many of them, and the doubles needed a lot of energy and spent a lot of it too. The boy told his doppelgangers that they would only fight after they had replenished their energy and told them not to let the bugs get too close. He thought about the energy replenishment crystal, but there was no point in using them now, because swords require a lot of energy and they wouldn't last long. Lin Lo was pleased to have reached level 24. The system had sent this message quite in time, which was great news. On the abilities panel, the guy selected flexibility by tapping the corresponding icon. Lee studied information about the new ability he was going to use, because it greatly reduces energy consumption, and under certain conditions, there are many more blades. Taking better care of his blade, the boy thought, with a smile that the time had come to kill this monster. Summoning the Dark Emperor and Kaguya, he ordered them all to attack together, having a plan. As soon as the boy was at the forefront of their group, they all launched an attack, determined to win the duel. They were going to kill the Insect King. They approached the Insect King, who roared at them, his swords drawn. Lin Lo screamed, wishing the monster death as they began to attack. Standing behind him and raising his sword, he ordered his doubles to give it their all. He ordered the wish-granting wizard, who appeared nearby, not to let any beetle get closer than a meter to him, which was granted. He used a cruelty crystal, which increased the level of the double by 30%, and then summoned a green demon. Looking at the swarm of insects flying towards him, the boy saw that the Insect King's health had dropped by 30%, but he called his subordinates. He ordered them to attack without a break. Watching the stranger fight on the back of the insect, the girl wished him luck when she found nothing on board as a weapon. Her eyes even filled with tears. Crouching down, Lin stuck the blade into the ground and held on to it. It seemed to him that he had no strength left for anything. The Lord of Prayers, who appeared behind him, said he would restore his strength. Lin Luo apologized to Lao Zi for disturbing him, but Lao Zi only smiled and said that it was his duty to protect him. As soon as he felt better, the boy immediately ran into battle, telling the Insect King that they would see who could last longer. Raising the blade above his head and jumping, the boy summoned a green demon while the Insect King opened his mouth, waiting for his opponent. The boy released his tentacles, attacking the king with them and distracting him. In flight, Lin Lo activated the ability of 1,000 swords, which began to appear next to him from portals, ready to attack as soon as he commanded. The boy began to attack, delivering a rather tangible blow to the monster's back, causing it to scream. Lin continued to press on the sword, screaming from the strain and force he was putting into the blow, but it still cut through the Insect King's flesh further and further, reaching the bones. He landed on one knee, sticking his blade into the ground and bowing his head. After the news that the Dark Emperor was the first to kill the Insect King, the reporter girl looked at Luo below in surprise and wondered if he was really the Dark Emperor. She began to wipe away tears, saying that she could not have imagined that such a young but strong and avid gambler would become emperor.